In a sun-dappled garden, two figures share a quiet moment under the watchful eyes of birds. Hey, Charlise, last time we talked about you wanted to make a movie about what's happening in your life. You said you'd think about it and let me know. What kind of movie do you want to make? A young, white-haired maid confirms she remembers the conversation. The young maid, Charlise, recalls a warning about a terrifying man. She clutches a teapot tightly, her expression shifting from contemplation to a sudden, brilliant smile. Charlise walks towards the woman sitting at the table. Charlise leans in close and begins to share a secret, confessing joyfully, "I like you the most, more than anyone in this world." The woman, overwhelmed with emotion, suddenly pulls Charlise into a tight embrace. The woman seeks reassurance, asking if Charlise truly likes her the most, which Charlise happily confirms. Charlise nestles into the hug, feeling cherished and safe. The warm memory fades, replaced by the cold reality of a dusty room. Charlise is slumped over at her post, exhausted from her chores. A sudden shout interrupts her as another maid demands to know if she has finished cleaning the fireplace. As the maid closes in on her, Charlise nervously stammers that she's almost done. The maid's face twists in anger as she begins to scold her. She berates Charlise for being too slow, continuing with a tirade about how she's useless for failing to finish her tasks quickly. The maid grabs her by the hair, cruelly mocking her age and stutter as Charlise promises to be faster. Walking away, the maid continues to belittle Charlise as a useless child who can't even speak properly. Finally, the maid sneers that she's stupid, causing Charlise to blush with shame and run off. She struggles with a heavy fireplace poker, reflecting on the hardships of being a trainee maid. She gasps and coughs, the dust and labor taking a toll on her small frame. An unseen voice coldly accuses her of faking her exhaustion. Despite the harsh treatment, Charlise's mood brightens as she reminds herself that it's Tuesday. Her eyes sparkle with secret joy and anticipation. She admires the now spotless fireplace, proud of her hard work. Considering what she knows about the future, Charlise decides to go see Sister Rose. She runs through the hallway, her mind on a story she knows all too well. With tears in her eyes, she accepts her fate. I, Charlise, am a supporting character. A memory surfaces, a newborn baby staring in shock. In a flashback, a group of maids frets over the abandoned infant, unsure of what to do. A senior maid sternly silences their panicked whispers. The head maid announces they will raise the child, revealing that Charlise grew up in the Imperial Palace. Under their care, her infancy was filled with neglect, the maids complaining about her constant crying. With her work always criticized, Charlise was inevitably forced into the life of a trainee maid. She silently did everything she was told, enduring endless bullying. After growing up, she attended a royal ball and danced with the emperor. But this future ends in tragedy. Charlise lies dying while a jealous woman watches. Her destiny is to die from the evil queen's jealousy. Realizing this, the young Charlise devises a survival strategy. Be a maid, save money, and then escape the palace. She pauses, contemplating the next step of her meticulous plan. Her primary goal is to avoid the emperor and queen's palaces until she comes of age. For the sake of her future, she vows to remain invisible to the emperor and queen. But her reality is harsh, and the constant bullying feels inescapable. Yet, even in this difficult life, she knows of one safe haven. Her destination is Sister Rose, the kindest and most beautiful person she knows. In the garden, the woman from her happy memory holds a single red rose. Charlise's eyes light up as she runs towards her, calling out happily. Rose turns with a gentle smile, pleased to see Charlise. Charlise throws herself at her, shouting, "Sister Rose." As they reunite in the garden, Rose gently holds Charlise's head, warning her that it's dangerous to run. Rose asks with concern what would happen if she fell, but Charlise just giggles happily. Charlise looks up with hopeful eyes and sweetly asks Sister Rose for a hug. Rose looks down, her expression softening with affection at the heartfelt request. Rose hugs Charlise tightly, remarking on how small she is, while Charlise asks if she can only get hugs when they're alone. In a sunlit conservatory, Rose calls out to Charlise, who is sitting on her lap. Rose gently asks Charlise if she's having any trouble at work. Charlise forces a smile and insists she's fine, hiding the memory of the vicious maid. Rose presses her, recalling that Charlise had previously mentioned being harassed by other maids. Charlise laughs nervously, trying to brush off the concern. As Rose strokes her head, she recalls complaining to Rose only once, the scene flashing back to Rose's side. In the memory, Rose rushes to her side with concern. A tearful Charlise explains how another trainee maid kept forcing her to do laundry. The flashback shows 3 maids arrogantly ordering Charlise to take their clothes to be washed. She remembers being sent to the laundry room repeatedly, struggling with heavy baskets. The memory culminates in a painful fall where she trips, spilling the clean laundry everywhere. As someone calls her name, Charlise, back in the present, admits it's hard to finish all the work, and Rose comforts her. In the flashback, a senior maid angrily declares that harassing someone is unacceptable and vows to handle the work herself. A narration explains that the head maid intervened as the guilty maids begged for forgiveness. As a result, the trainee maids who bullied her were transferred to the laundry. Charlise reflects that reporting them only made the other trainee maids hate her more. She flinches from a sudden, hard shove. An angry maid glares at a terrified Charlise, who shrinks away from her. Charlise thinks to herself that after that incident, the bullying became even worse. She realizes that for things to be resolved so quickly, Rose must have noble status. Charlise marvels at Rose's beauty, thinking her face and hair are more beautiful than a rose. Her thoughts drift, comparing Rose's noble beauty to the evil queen from the novel. Horrified by her own thoughts, Charlise panics, wondering what she's thinking. She scolds herself for comparing the kind Rose to the queen, which confuses Rose, who is still holding her. Charlise refocuses, telling herself not to get distracted by such foolish thoughts. She worries that if the Emperor saw Rose's unparalleled beauty, he wouldn't leave her alone. Charlise is suddenly gripped by panic, fearing the Emperor might have already harmed Rose, and becomes determined to protect her. Startled by her sudden agitation, Rose asks what's wrong and who is tormenting her now. Charlise quickly deflects, saying it's not like that. As she changes the subject, she bluntly asks if Rose has ever met His Majesty the Emperor. Rose's expression becomes unreadable and somber as Charlise looks up from her embrace. Rose playfully pinches Charlise's cheek, declaring that her Charles is far more precious than any emperor. Realizing Rose must not like the Emperor, Charlise happily agrees. Beaming, Charlise declares that she missed Sister Rose more than the Emperor. Rose, clearly moved by Charlise's heartfelt confession, smiles tenderly. Stroking her head, Rose asks which palace Charlise wants to work in after her training is over. Without hesitation, Charlise happily exclaims that she wants to go where her sister works. Overjoyed, Rose hugs Charlise affectionately again, praising her as the best. In a picturesque moment, Charlise responds in kind, telling Rose she loves her too. The warm, happy memory settles as the two continue to sit in the tranquil conservatory. The scene shifts to a colder, less ornate part of the palace where Charlise walks alone. Carrying a full bucket of water, she struggles to push open a heavy door. Thud! The sound echoes in the empty hall. Charlise falls into the spilled water just as the maid, Becky, appears. Angry that she hasn't finished her work, Becky sneers cruelly, ordering Charlise to hurry up and clean the main hallway next. She maliciously reminds Charlise that cleaning is her job now, leaving the young maid speechless. Another maid briefly dismisses Charlise's plight, saying she's too busy and suggesting she ask Becky for help. With a parting good luck with that, the maid leaves Charlise alone and disheartened in the dim hallway. Slumped on the floor, Charlise realizes with a jolt of panic that it's Sister Rose's birthday, and she might not get to see her. Shaking off her despair, she gets back to work, sweeping determinedly and telling herself there's still hope. Charlise works frantically with the heavy bucket, determined to finish quickly so nothing goes wrong. Suddenly, Charlise gasps, staring in shock at something unseen. She discovers the hallway she just cleaned is now covered in muddy footprints and dark stains. Utterly defeated, Charlise collapses, realizing that if she misses today, she won't see Rose for 2 weeks. As she scrubs the filthy floor, she sadly wonders if her sister even wants to see her. Looking at her hands, now raw and bleeding from the hard work, she winces in pain, biting her lip to keep from crying. Charlise reminds herself that she'll be scolded if she cries. With tears in her eyes, she clutches her injured hands and whispers Rose's name for strength. A vision of Rose appears, smiling warmly and calling out to Charlise. Charlise rubs her teary eyes, convinced she's imagining her sister's voice. Suddenly, Rose appears in person, catching the stumbling Charlise and calling her name in alarm. Rose gently takes Charlise's hands, asking in horror why they're so injured. As Rose asks if she's okay, a crying Charlise looks up in disbelief, barely able to whisper her sister's name. Still stunned by her sudden appearance, Charlise asks why Rose is there. Rose explains that she came because she was worried, having not seen her Charlise for several days. In the middle of the filthy hallway, Rose kneels and pulls the crying Charlise into a comforting embrace. A close-up shows a flash of cold fury in Rose's eyes. Rose asks if Charlise cleaned the entire hallway by herself, which she tearfully confirms. Ashamed, Charlise apologizes for crying. Rose gently holds Charlise's scraped hands and tells her to listen carefully. Rose reassures Charlise that it's normal for children to cry, but Charlise explains that that's not what she's worried about. Charlise internally worries that she'll become a burden if she always needs Rose to solve her problems. With a kind smile, Rose asks if Charlise is worried that she doesn't trust her. Horrified by the suggestion, Charlise waves her hands frantically, insisting that's not at all. Rose's expression softens as she says she wants Charlise to be able to rely on her during difficult times. Her words strike a chord with Charlise, whose eyes widen in surprise. Rose's expression shifts through a series of contemplative and serious glances. Rose kneels before Charlise, having finished explaining what happened. Charlise confirms to Rose that the trainee, maid named Becky, caused all this. Rose seethes with anger. She mutters Becky's name, holding back a violent reprisal for Charlise's sake. Sensing Rose's fury, a tearful Charlise nervously asks if she did something wrong. Rose quickly contains her anger and suggests calling for help, but Charlise refuses, not wanting to bother anyone. Beaming, Rose changes tactics, announcing that she will help Charlise clean up together. Charlise immediately protests, insisting she can handle herself. Rose looks heartbroken, admitting that seeing Charlise cleaning alone breaks her heart. Charlise hesitates, confessing she's afraid it will cause gossip among the other maids. Rose smiles reassuringly, promising she won't tell anyone, though Charlise still looks hesitant. Charlise's worry finally gives way to a brilliant smile as she enthusiastically thanks Rose for her help. Day fades into night, and the magnificent palace is enveloped in twilight. While working, Charlise comes to a firm conclusion. Rose must be from a noble family. She glances at the discarded cleaning tools, pondering the implications of this new realization. Charlise realizes Rose is too frail for such physical labor as she watches her sister collapse from exhaustion. Looking out the window, Charlise worriedly asks the slumped Rose if she's okay. Rose apologizes for not being more helpful, but Charlise quickly tells her not to worry. With renewed energy, Charlise waves her arms, happily announcing that she's finished. Thanks to Rose's help, in the now spotless room, Charlise dances joyfully, a cartoon owl celebrating with her under the night sky. Rose smirks and tells Charlise that she's a terrible liar. Charlise insists Rose is good at everything else, which Rose seems to doubt. In a sparkling memory, Charlise praises Rose's beautiful singing voice. Charlise happily recalls Rose's expert sewing skills. Charlise leans in, continuing her heartfelt praise. With a look of adoration, Charlise declares that Rose is the most beautiful person in the world. Rose blushes, deeply moved by the sincere compliment, and softly calls Charlise's name. She tells Charlise that hearing her say that makes her incredibly happy. Suddenly, Charlise flinches as Rose reaches for her. Rose's expression turns to concern as she calls out Charlise's name. Charlise looks down at her own dirty uniform, worried about getting Rose's clothes dirty. Ignoring the filth, Rose pulls the surprised Charlise into a warm and affectionate hug. Nestled in the embrace, a blushing Charlise whispers a thank you. The scene cuts back to the spilled bucket, a stark reminder of their task. Charlise eagerly tells Rose to wait, promising she'll clean it up right away. Rose gently tells her to rest first, but Charlise insists she can finish it quickly. The now gleaming hallway reflects the passage of time, their work complete. Charlise notes it's the first time she's seen Rose sitting on the floor, which Rose jokingly agrees with. Charlize's thoughts drift, realizing Rose acts like a noble and wondering about her job. She deduces that noble maids work in the Emperor's or Queen's palace. The possibility fills Charlise with a sudden, overwhelming dread. Rose notices her troubled expression and asks what's wrong, but Charlise brushes it off. Unconvinced, Rose insists on helping and reaches for the cleaning basket. Startled by an unfamiliar voice, Charlise looks up. A maid stands in a distant doorway, interrupting their moment. Becky appears, angrily asking if they're done, her arrogance shocking Charlise. Becky gloats and taunts Charlise, questioning her qualifications as a maid and threatening more training. Rose steps protectively in front of Charlise, cutting Becky off and pointing out her arrogant behavior. Rose calmly confirms the bully's name is Becky, who now looks flustered and angry. A shocked Becky demands to know who Rose is. Becky internally notes that Rose isn't wearing a formal maid's brooch. Regaining her confidence, Becky sneers, finding the situation amusing, and belittles Rose. Rose coldly points out Becky's cruelty, adding that she herself is not important. Enraged by the comeback, Becky shouts at Rose in disbelief. Becky scoffs, wondering how someone as incompetent as Rose became a trainee maid. Becky's face contorts with rage, her gaze falling on the bucket of dirty water nearby. As Charlise screams a warning, Becky maliciously grabs the bucket and throws it. Charlise lunges to intervene, but Becky succeeds in drenching Rose with the dirty water. A title card marks the end of the chapter. Seeing the aftermath of the splash, Rose panics and calls Charlise's name. Soaked and filthy, Charlise looks up with concern and asks if Rose is okay. Ignoring her own state, Rose worries that Charlise will catch a cold. Charlise forces a smile, wipes her dirty face, and reassures Rose that she's fine. With a cold, determined gaze, Rose stands protectively in front of Charlise. Becky gloats, telling Rose she's not so haughty now, and mockingly warns Charlise. Rose glares back, her fury palpable, while Charlise clings to her in fear. Becky rants about the head maid's favoritism, accusing Charlise of being a lazy coward. Becky loudly invokes the Queen's name in defiance, which terrifies Charlise and shocks Rose. As Charlise whispers her name in confusion, Rose stares straight ahead, her expression cold and unreadable. A maid bows deeply, announcing Her Majesty, the Queen, has arrived. The maid greets the Queen, revealing Rose standing beside a stunned Charlise. Becky watches in horror, realizing who Sister Rose truly is. A blonde maid looks at Rose in surprise, questioning if it's really Her Majesty the Queen. Looking weary, Rose confirms her presence by addressing the head maid as Hayden. Charlise connects the dots internally, realizing Hayden is the head maid of the Queen's palace. She clutches her skirt, her mind racing as she grasps the implications of her sister's identity. Rose explains to Hayden that when she couldn't find Charlise, she went to look for her herself. Becky sees with fear and resentment, while Rose glares back with cold authority. Rose calmly identifies the trembling bully as the trainee maid, Becky. Rose reflects that she should have realized the truth about her identity sooner. She realizes all the signs were there. Her elegant demeanor and noble appearance were all clues that she was the queen. Charlise comes to a horrifying conclusion. Sister Rose is the villainess destined to kill her. Rose orders Becky to apologize to Charlise. Charlise gasps, taken aback by the direct order. A confused Becky stammers, not understanding the command. Rose points out Becky's selective hearing, prompting a hasty apology to Charlise. Charlise thinks that this moment of vindication has arrived, but she feels no satisfaction at all. Becky offers a panicked and insincere apology to Charlise. Charlise feels a pang of guilt, but Rose dismisses the apology, demanding that Becky show true remorse by getting on her knees and bowing her head to the floor. A distressed Charlise quietly insists she's fine, Your Majesty. Rose angrily threatens to have Becky thrown out of the palace, terrifying the trainee maid. Becky immediately drops to the ground, desperately begging Charlise for forgiveness. Rose empowers a stunned Charlise, telling her to decide Becky's punishment. A satisfied smile touches Rose's lips. Becky continues to tremble on the floor, awaiting her fate. Charlise sentences Becky to meticulously complete all her previous tasks, which Becky gratefully accepts. As Hayden confirms the order, Rose adds a further punishment, cutting Becky's salary in half as a final blow. Rose postpones Becky's promotion for 3 years, a sentence Becky meekly accepts. Rose coldly orders Becky to get out of her sight. After the confrontation, Rose and Charlise stand in a quiet, floral-themed moment. Rose asks about Charlise's hands, but Charlise defensively pulls away, insisting she's fine. Charlise turns away, formally apologizing for bothering someone as noble as Rose. Rose looks hurt by the sudden distance. As Charlise speaks, she bows her head, her expression filled with sadness and shame. Rose tells Charlise she'll see her tomorrow and asks Hayden to escort her, but Charlise quickly insists on going alone. Rose smiles gently, agreeing to Charlise's request. As Rose and Hayden leave, Hayden formally addresses her as Your Majesty. Charlise feels overwhelmed, shocked by Rose's promise to meet again tomorrow. As Rose walks away, Charlise wonders if she misheard the promise. The scene shifts to a flashback in a sun-drenched garden. In the memory, a young Charlise is crying behind a rose bush. Suddenly, Rose appears from behind the hedge, asking who's there and startling the wide-eyed Charlise. A beautiful memory shows Rose and Charlise looking at each other, both wearing flower crowns. The young Charlise dries her tears and asks who found her. The red-haired woman smiles warmly and introduces herself as Rose. Thinking she's a visiting noble, Charlise offers to show her the way. Rose smiles brightly and happily corrects her, insisting she's a maid. Charlise questions if Rose is a maid, and Rose explains she just hasn't had time to change yet. Rose gently asks Charlise why she's crying, but she insists it's nothing. Rose reassures Charlise that she doesn't have to explain and kindly asks for her name. She introduces herself as Charlise, explaining she's a commoner with no last name. Rose compliments her pretty name and asks if she can call her Charles from now on. From now on, Charlise blushes, pondering the meaning behind from now on. Charlise hopefully asks if they will meet again, and Rose promises they will, gently stroking Charlise's tear-stained face. Rose reassures her that they'll see each other again since they're both maids. A warm feeling spreads through Charlise, and she smiles blissfully. The happy memory suddenly shatters, turning into a dark and desperate scene. In the darkness, a hand reaches for a frightened Charlise. The dream fades to reveal Rose in the distance, and Charlise calls out for her sister. Charlise desperately reaches for Rose, shouting for her sister as she walks away. A hand shoots out as someone screams Rose's name. Charlise jolts awake in bed, gasping for air from the nightmare. Shaken, she whispers Rose's name, still feeling the lingering warmth of the dream. The precious memory is broken, and Charlise realizes that the kind Rose is no longer here. In reality, Charlise trembles as she looks at Rose, the words Your Majesty repeating in her mind. A new flashback shows someone crying softly behind a window late at night. A young Charlise wakes up, looking around in confusion. A maid reassures her, telling her not to worry because she's a maid in the Queen's palace now. The maid smiles warmly, revealing that the Queen herself appointed her. She speculates that the Queen must be especially fond of Charles. Feeling inadequate, Charlise admits her shortcomings, but the maid gently calls her name. The maid pats her head, reassuring her that she's been doing a great job and will be fine. Charlise's expression shifts from surprise to deep worry. The maid hurries Charlise along, reminding her that she has to leave by 2 o'clock. Back in the present, Charlise walks down a long corridor. Realizing this is what Rose's promise meant, she clenches her hands, thinking this meeting is more terrifying than entering a tiger's den. Charlise collapses onto her new bed, worrying about how to act in front of the Queen. She sits up with determination, knowing she can't be late. Arriving at a magnificent fountain and garden, Charlise's breath catches at the sight. She marvels at the breathtaking beauty of the Queen's palace. A wave of anxiety hits her, and she wonders if she's worthy of walking on such a grand path. Carrying her small suitcase, Charlise continues through the beautiful courtyard. She stops, sensing she's being watched. 2 maids gossip nearby, recognizing Charlise as the one the Queen appointed and criticizing her appearance. They continue their malicious whispers, wondering how someone from the education center gained the Queen's favor. Charlise feels trapped, surrounded by countless scrutinizing and empty eyes. The heavy reality hits her. The people here already hate her. Noticing she overheard, the maids sneer cruelly, confident she can't do anything about it. One of the maids smirks, taunting that Charlise can't do anything but cry. A sharp voice cuts through their bullying, demanding to know what they're doing. A serene, blonde woman appears before them, followed by the imposing figure of Rose. The blonde woman smiles with calm authority amidst the flowers. As Rose steps forward in her royal attire, the gossiping maids stammer in terror, "Your Majesty." The two maids immediately drop to the ground, prostrating themselves before Rose. Flustered and terrified, they try to make excuses for their behavior. The blonde woman sternly cuts them off, ordering them to step back without any excuses. A group of maids, including the blonde one, bows deeply as the queen walks through the garden courtyard. In this moment, someone's thoughts call out Charlize's name. Charlise bows deeply, formally requesting an audience with the queen using a long and respectful title. The queen turns her head, a hint of surprise in her expression. She smiles faintly and comments that it's been a while since she's heard such a polite greeting. The queen adds that she doesn't want such a formal greeting from Charlise, while Charlise thinks she never expected to greet Sister Rose this way. The queen welcomes Charles to her palace and instructs the blonde maid, Hayden, to take Charles to her room. The queen walks ahead as Hayden leads Charlise, who is carrying a small piece of luggage, through the palace courtyard. A floral title card marks a turn in the story. Charlise looks up with a worried expression, thinking of the queen. She is startled when Hayden places a hand on her shoulder. Charlise bows deeply, formally introducing herself as the new apprentice maid, and Hayden wishes her well. Hayden reveals that the queen has ordered her to take special care of Charlise, much to Charlise's surprise. Hayden crouches down and kindly tells Charlise, "Don't be nervous and feel at ease in the palace." Hayden points to the suitcase in Charlise's hand and asks if that is her luggage. With a bright, confident smile, Charlise proudly confirms it is. Hayden is surprised that after 5 years, Charlise only has such a small bag, decides to help her get more things, and offers to carry the bag for her. Charlise quickly pulls the bag back, insisting she can carry it herself. With a warm, reassuring smile, Hayden insists on helping, saying she can't just watch a 5-year-old carry such a large bag. Charlise blushes with gratitude and shyly thanks Hayden for her kindness. As Hayden takes the bag, Charlise watches her with a thoughtful and slightly confused expression. Following behind Hayden, Charlise reevaluates her first impression, realizing this maid is much kinder than she initially thought. Wow! Charlise gasps in surprise at the sight before her. She gazes in awe at a beautifully furnished, sunlit room, while Hayden watches her reaction from the side. Charlise asks if the room is really for her, and Hayden cheerfully confirms it is. Charlise is shocked, remembering that rooms like this are for official maids. Her spirits sink as she points out she isn't an official maid yet, making Hayden realize her mistake. Hayden corrects herself and formally announces Charlise as a maid of the Queen's palace, leaving her stunned. Hayden, beaming, tells her to change into her new uniform and get some rest. Charlise joyfully holds up her shiny new maid's uniform. She closes her eyes, basking in a moment of pure happiness. She twirls around gleefully, celebrating having a comfortable bed, a clean dress, and her own beautiful room. Her thoughts continue to revel in the joy of having a comfortable and pretty room. She nuzzles the pillow and sighs in contentment, admitting to herself that she loves it here. Two maids gossip about head maid Weber personally giving Charlise a rose quartz brooch, wondering what's so special about her. An explanation box states that regular maids wear rose quartz brooches. A sparkling diamond brooch is shown against a purple background. An explanation box notes that maids in charge of a palace wear citron brooches, displaying the yellow gem. The screen explains that a maid named Becky once mistook the queen for a trainee because she wasn't wearing a brooch. Charlise grows worried, knowing that an official maid's brooch requires care from a senior maid, and she fears being disliked. She continues to eavesdrop from behind a partially open door. An unseen person approaches the gossiping maids and coldly observes that they seem to be having a pleasant chat. Startled by the new voice, Charlise peers out from the doorway, with wide, fearful eyes. A stern-looking head, maid wearing a citron brooch appears, icily asking the gossiping maids if they have a death wish. The two maids gasp in terror, recognizing the newcomer as head maid Weber. From her hiding spot, Charlise realizes this is the woman who gave her the crystal brooch. A new chapter begins with head maid Weber standing ominously before the two terrified maids, while Charlise watches in suspense. Weber coldly demands the gossiping maids repeat what the queen said yesterday. A beautiful flashback shows the queen smiling as she instructs someone to treat her well, as everything will be new to her. The gossiping maids recall the queen's explicit warning to treat the new maid well. The blonde woman reminds them they have defied the queen's direct summons and orders. Charlise feels overwhelmed, wondering why the queen cares so much and feeling completely deceived by her. In a flashback, a curly-haired maid sneers, declaring Charlise is useless. One of the bullying maids asks if she isn't angry that the queen is favoring a child. The curly-haired maid smiles slyly, saying everyone in the queen's palace has their role. She closes her eyes and declares her role is to be herself. She challenges the others, asking how much work the child actually does compared to all of them. She loudly questions if any of them can truly please the queen. She flatly declares that only Charlise can, which stuns the eavesdropping Charlise. Stunned, hiding behind the door, Charlise feels hopeless, feeling she can't trust the queen. The curly-haired maid reminds the others that Charlise was promoted to an official maid by Her Majesty herself. She accuses them of protesting the queen's direct order, silencing them with fear. She turns to find Charlise peeking from the doorway and calmly responds, "Oh, really?" When a maid asks if Charlise was upset by the others, Charlise flinches with a clatter. Charlise denies it, abruptly realizing the maid knew she was eavesdropping. The head maid apologizes for their rude first meeting and introduces herself as Lisa Webby. Lisa warmly wishes Charlise good luck, calling her my third sister. The ornate brooch on Charlise's uniform sparkles brilliantly. Lisa asks to call her Charles, and Charlise readily agrees, though she is confused by the word third. In the hall, Charlise asks Lisa if being the third sister means the queen has to pay 3 maids. Lisa explains that the queen dislikes paying for labor costs, and Charlise realizes the story is deviating from what she knows. Charlise recalls how Rose worked tirelessly from morning to night, even skipping meals on weekends. Charlise worriedly asks aloud when the queen ever gets to rest. Lisa admits the queen hasn't rested much from the very beginning. She leads Charlise to the cleaning room, mentioning that the queen is always out on Tuesdays and Saturdays. These 2 specific days strike a chord with Charlise, and she stops in her tracks. Charlise makes a startling connection. Those were the days she met with her sister Rose. Lisa calls out Charles, pulling her from her thoughts. Lisa smiles and tells Charlise that she is the only one who can please the queen, asking her to make the queen smile. Charlise remains silent, lowering her head with a heavy heart. Lisa warmly invites Charlise to eat, dismissing her concern that the queen hasn't eaten yet. Charlise feels confused and nervous. Charlise looks up at Lisa with renewed energy. Lisa mobilizes a surprised Charlise to go eat with her. Lisa cheerfully leads a smiling Charlise away, eager to share a good meal. Lisa playfully announces that the dining train is departing. Charlise happily follows along, mimicking a choo-choo sound. Overcome with joy, Charlise excitedly shouts, "Let's go." Charlise is mesmerized by a large table laden with exquisite cakes and pastries. She innocently asks if the lavish meal is for the queen. Lisa grins, revealing that the delicious spread is just for the 2 of them. Charlise gasps in disbelief and asks if the savory foods are for them too, which Lisa confirms. Charlise doesn't hesitate to take a large bite of fresh bread, her face beaming with happiness. In a moment of pure joy, Charlise affectionately hugs the large loaf. Charlise chews with her cheeks full as Lisa watches her with a fond smile. With a clink, Lisa puts down her utensils and calls out Charles. Her mouth still full, Charlise looks up in response. A finger gently pokes Charlise's soft cheek. A spark of pure adoration flashes behind Lisa as she marvels at Charlise's cuteness. Lisa gleefully pinches Charlise's cheeks, comparing them to pudding, while Charlise feels embarrassed. Lisa enthusiastically piles food for Charles, who protests that she's about to choke. The cheerful sounds of their meal echo through the grand palace. The scene shifts to Lisa asking the queen if she would like anything from the lavish meal. The queen smiles gently and politely declines the food. She then asks Lisa how Charles is adjusting to her first day in the palace. Lisa reports with a broad smile that Charles is a clear-headed and lovely child. The queen agrees with a fond smile, repeating that Charles is indeed lovely. Lisa recounts how happy Charles was to see her room, which delights the queen. Lisa smiles warmly, recalling that Charles's adorable expression made her smile too. The queen puffs up her cheeks, thinking she wants to see Charles's cute face as well. When Lisa asks, Rose denies, thinking about anything. Lisa notes that while Charles is smart, she can be slow to respond in communication. The queen muses on this, and Lisa adds that she's much better now. In a bright memory, a young Charlise happily greets her sister Rose upon her arrival. The queen reflects that Charlise is a naive child, too young to perceive the truth of things. A flashback shows both the queen and Charlise dressed as maids as the queen recalls their first meeting. She realizes that the more she saw Charles, the more she felt she couldn't let her go. In the past, a hopeful Charlise had asked if she and someone named Gotti could stay by her side, which puzzled the queen at the time. The queen remembers being struck by Charlise's unwavering loyalty and decided to investigate her situation. Her investigation revealed a harsh reality. The other maids bullied Charlise, calling her useless and a burden. In a cruel memory, a sneering maid serves a pitifully small portion as Charlise's dinner. The queen narrates that her attempts to help only made Charlise's situation worse, as the scene shows a sorrowful Charlise in hiding. The queen resolved that for Charles's safety, she would bring her into the palace and make her an official maid. A flashback shows a maid kneeling on the floor, apologizing to Charlise. Charlise lowers her head, tears streaming down her face from emotional pain. The queen clutches her head, anguished by the realization that she hurt Charlise even in the palace. Her expression stiffens as a new, unsettling thought crosses her mind. She tells Lisa that she gave a direct order for everyone to treat Charles well and asks what happened that morning. Lisa hesitates before admitting that the other maids don't seem to like Charles. The queen's gaze sharpens as she demands to know what she means. Lisa explains that they blame things on Charles because of her young age and her background from the education center. The queen seethes with anger, thinking how dare they blame her person. She trembles with rage that they couldn't follow one simple instruction. Her expression turns icy as she decides to show them who the true master of the palace is. Lisa quickly intervenes, offering to handle it and encouraging the queen to eat something, but the queen has lost her appetite. Lisa reminds her that Charlise would be sad if she knew she hadn't eaten, which sways the queen. Caught off guard by the emotional appeal, the queen stammers in surprise. Lisa mimics Charlise's worried tone, persuading the queen, who reluctantly agrees to eat right away. Lisa softly comments that it's been a long time since the queen has shown her expressions so freely. A brief memory flashes of a cold and distant throne room. Lisa comments that she hasn't shown her emotions since coming to the palace, addressing her as Hayden. Hayden's mood instantly brightens, and she smiles, asking if Charles enjoyed the food. Lisa confirms with a broad grin that Charles must have been very happy with the meal. The scene transitions to a beautiful starry sky with a faint rainbow. The palace rests peacefully in the magical twilight. In her room, Charlise stands before a mirror by candlelight. She looks at her reflection with a confident smile and declares that she is ready. Blurry memories of the gossiping maids appear behind her, representing her past anxieties. She shakes her head vigorously to dispel the negativity, asserting, "No, Charlise." Charlise reassures herself that she is now an official maid and even a superior, so there's nothing to worry about. She puffs out her cheeks with new resolve, thinking of how much the person named Weber helped her yesterday. A head maid gives Charlise a tour of the spacious mansion, pointing out the kitchen and cleaning rooms. Charlise studies diligently, determined to follow instructions and memorize the name and face of every maid. She feels dizzy and overwhelmed while trying to recite a long list of names. Thump! Charlise collapses from exhaustion, and a worried maid rushes to check on her. With renewed fighting spirit, Charlise thinks that she must help everyone to make the best impression. She stands firm, her small fists clenched with determination. Charlise peeks at the other maids from behind a door, hoping not to mess up and anger the queen. She takes a deep breath to calm her nerves, preparing to face her new colleagues. Charlise approaches enthusiastically and crisply asks the maids if they need help with their work. Surrounded by question marks, Charlise looks up in confusion. A pink-haired maid formally greets her, addressing her as Miss Charlise. Charlise is stunned by the title. Charlise wonders what is happening. She realizes this is the first time she has seen all the maids gathered in one place. The pink-haired maid asks why she is up so early, and Charlise explains that she wanted to help. The maid kindly refuses her offer, telling her she doesn't need to help with their work. Charlise studies the maid's face, realizing she is not the same person she saw yesterday. After the maid confirms this, Charlise asks where the previous maids are. The maid reveals that all of yesterday's maids were replaced by the queen's special order, shocking Charlise. Charlise worries it's her fault, but a familiar, smiling woman calls her name from the doorway. She recognizes her as head maid Weber. Charlise walks over to Weber and respectfully asks if she can ask a question. Weber warmly encourages her, saying she can ask anything she wants. Charlise hesitantly asks why all the maids were suddenly replaced. Weber simply smiles and turns the question back to her, asking, "So, why?" Charlise realizes with horror that it really was because of her. Weber kindly hands her an ointment, telling her to apply it to her hands. When Charlise thanks her, Weber clarifies that Charlise should thank the person who actually gave her the ointment. Charlise looks at the ointment in her hand, confused. Weber reveals the ointment is from the queen, who is worried about Charlise's hands, leaving Charlise stunned. Deeply moved, Charlise looks at the gift, realizing the queen remembered her chapped hands. A memory surfaces of the rose, like Queen gently holding her small, dirty hands. Weber recalls that the queen asked about Charlise's well-being no less than 50 times, while Charlise has also been asking about the queen. Weber concludes with a knowing smile that the queen seems to be very fond of Charlise. Charlise clasps her hands and remains silent, her heart filled with conflict. The scene shows Charlise diligently scrubbing the floor of a vast, ornate hall by herself. She recalls her past of being bullied and eating leftovers, now feeling grateful for warm food and a soft bed. While cleaning a window, she smiles blissfully, her heart full of joy and contentment. An unseen person suddenly shouts, demanding to know what she is doing there. A hand reaches down to help her up, while she protests that her hands are too dirty. She shrinks back, trying to pull her hand away. A blonde maid fusses over her, worried that her legs are numb and her clothes are dirty. The maid smiles gently, reassuring her that a little dust is fine. Moved by the sudden kindness, Charlise feels her heart race. The maid looks at the sparkling floor and marvels that only a 5-year-old could scrub it so clean. Seeing the maid's unreadable expression, Charlise worries she is unhappy with her cleaning. She jumps up, eagerly promising she could do other jobs even better. She energetically and proudly declares that she can also mop the floors and the surrounding room sparkle. The maid stares, dumbfounded, at Charlise's bright and determined smile. The blonde maid asks Charlise if she has ever cleaned the fireplace alone. The maid's hand rests on her shoulder, and a startled Charlise hesitantly confirms she has. In the vast hall, a blurry figure looms over Charlise, repeating the question of whether she cleaned the fireplace alone. A red-haired woman appears, angrily demanding to know if Charlise is telling the truth. The queen questions the maid, seeking confirmation that Charlise did indeed clean the fireplace. The maid and an awkward Charlise bow respectfully to greet the queen. The queen cuts off the pleasantries and directly asks Charlise if she cleaned the fireplace. Her expression turns to anger as she scolds Charlise for not telling her about such dangerous work. The queen clutches her head in frustration, while Charlise looks up at her, confused. The queen sternly forbids Charlise from doing dangerous work until she is 15, but Charlise starts to protest. The queen decisively silences her with a sharp, strictly forbidden, and Charlise silently accepts the order. With one last stern glance, the queen turns and leaves. Her words still hanging in the air, Charlise is left completely bewildered by the queen's intense reaction. The queen announces her departure and walks away, leaving Charlise and the maid behind. Charlise mutters to herself that she'd rather the queen just say what's on her mind. Charlise clutches her dress, worried that people will get the wrong idea if Rose continues to treat her so kindly. The maid asks Charlise if she heard the queen's order, but Charlise just looks up blankly. The maid smiles warmly and gently explains that children cannot be made to perform dangerous tasks. The maid pats Charlize's head and asks if she understands, and Charlise blushes and agrees. As she turns to leave, a thought suddenly strikes Charlise. She wonders how the queen always manages to appear at just the right moment. Charlise walks with the maid down a magnificent, sunlit corridor. In a flashback, Charlise recalls that her 5 years at the education center taught her something crucial. Remembering her past work, she reflects that becoming observant to survive has become an instinct. She concludes that she has assessed the palace atmosphere and noticed that everyone loves the queen. This is different from the original novel. While walking with Weber, Charlise is surprised to hear that the queen helped her. Weber explains that because her family was poor, the queen mercifully allowed her to become a maid. Charlise looks up curiously and asks Weber what she wanted when she became a head maid. Weber had fantasized about wealth, explaining that a high salary and reputation would benefit both her and her family. Weber tells Charlise she'll understand when she becomes a head maid in the future and asks if she's curious about anything else. Charlise thinks her biggest problem is not knowing how to face the queen, but she keeps this to herself. She lets out a small gasp with a smile, startled by something unseen, and someone asks, "What's wrong?" Charlise dismisses it as her imagination and cheerfully urges Weber to move on. Weber thoughtfully asks if Charlise is curious about the queen's past. Charlise's eyes light up as she mentions she heard the queen even worked as a nanny when she was young. Weber confirms she has always been known for her beauty and wisdom, much to Charlise's admiration. She adds that people from all over would come just to see her, and a memory of her many suitors appears on screen. Charlise blushes and nods, privately agreeing that the queen is the most beautiful person in the world. Suddenly, Charlise's expression turns serious, and she clenches her fist, causing a worried Weber to ask what's wrong. Charlise's eyes widen as she insists she just felt something. As a startling realization hits her, her eyes widen in shock. Her gaze travels past Weber to a large decorative plant in the hallway. She wonders if the hairstyle she glimpsed behind the plant could be. Charlise quickly covers her eyes, thinking she must have seen it wrong. Weber asks if she got something in her eye, while a single tear rolls down her cheek. Charlise asks Weber what's wrong, changing the subject. Charlise asks Weber what the queen is doing at the moment. Weber glances out the window, guessing that at 3 in the afternoon, the queen is probably reviewing the account books. She tells a doubtful Charlise that the queen is very busy, something she can't understand at her age. Charlise asks why she's asking, then chuckles to herself, thinking that the very busy person is hiding behind the plant. She justifies her curiosity by reasoning that as the queen's maid, she needs to know everything about the queen. Everything. The queen peeks out from behind the plant with a sheepish expression. Weber keeps walking, but feels a familiar gaze on her back. Charlise squeezes her eyes shut, scolding herself internally. She resolves to remain stern, reminding herself that the woman is the queen, not Rose. From behind the plant, Charlise watches the queen walk away down the ornate corridor. The queen stops abruptly, the name Charlise on her mind. She quickly ducks back behind the tall plant to hide. In a quiet room, the queen sits on a sofa with Weber attending to her. As Weber gently brushes her hair, addressing her as Your Majesty. The queen is surprised by Weber's sudden conversation and asks what she's thinking. She chokes on her tea in surprise at what Weber says next. The queen wipes her mouth and asks with a sheepish smile how Weber found out. Weber bluntly asks how long she plans on following Charlise, startling the queen. The queen repeats her question, genuinely surprised that her actions were discovered. She advises the queen that while Charlise should know, her constant hiding is becoming inconvenient. The queen laments that she wants to apologize to Charlise, but doesn't know how. She's sure the girl is still angry. Weber asks with a knowing smile if Charlise is really that important to her. The queen immediately affirms this, declaring she genuinely cares for Charlise. She smiles fondly, recalling how Charlise's bright smile held no prejudice. A memory of Charlise laughing among the flowers comes to her mind. The queen closes her eyes peacefully, saying that being with Charlise lets her forget her troubles. She tells Weber she knows this too, while Weber reflects on the burden of being the queen. A grand illustration depicts the queen on her throne as the first lady of Sodier, above all her subjects. Her Her inner monologue reveals she never wanted the title, recalling the endless formal greetings. She remembers facing the court and hearing nothing but the constant repetition of Your Majesty, the Queen. A shadow crosses her eyes as she recalls the overwhelming pressure of her role. The scene changes, marking the start of a new chapter. Weber looks at the dejected Queen with concern. Weber smiles gently and suggests she should have a serious talk with Charlise. The Queen seems surprised by the idea, but Weber insists that Charlise is smart enough to understand. She worries about the possibility of being rejected, fearing Charlise hasn't forgiven her yet. Weber gently encourages her, saying it's better to speak up than to suffer in silence. She reminds the Queen of her own feelings, asking if Charlise isn't important to her. As Weber turns to leave, the Queen is lost in thought. The scene shifts to a majestic view of the palace exterior. Charlise is startled when the Queen appears at the top of a staircase and calls her name. The Queen takes Charlise's hand and asks if they can talk, much to Charlise's surprise. As they walk hand in hand through a garden, Charlise begins to recognize her surroundings. She has a sudden realization that this is the garden where she used to cry before she met the Queen. They arrive at a secluded gazebo surrounded by flowers. The Queen explains that this is actually a detached palace located within the Queen's main palace. A sweating Charlise is completely bewildered by this revelation. With a warm smile, the Queen invites her to sit beside her. Charlise cautiously sits next to the Queen on the bench. The Queen fondly recalls their first meeting, reminding Charlise of the question she had asked. She begins to explain why she lied about being a maid. Charlise remains silent, listening intently, and the Queen hesitates. The Queen smiles warmly, revealing she wanted Charlise to see her as Eloise, not just the Queen. Charlise looks up, absorbing the significance of Eloise, sharing her real name. Eloise admits that while it may sound like an excuse, she did lie to Charlise. Charlise internally processes the stunning fact, the sister Rose she knew. In reality, this was the Queen. As a flashback of memories appears, Charlise believes the Queen's deception has turned all their time together into a lie. With a dejected look, Charlise concludes in her heart that the Queen is clearly not the person she thought she was. In a memory, a woman praises Charlise for being cute, making Charlise feel she is no longer as lonely as her prototype in the novel. When another maid comforts her, Charlise has a sudden realization that this Queen might not be the cruel person she read about in the original novel. She accepts her fault, admitting that her own prejudice blinded her from seeing the truth. Eloise continues to explain that she has always admired Charlise during their time together, shocking the girl. Eloise notices that Charlise's gaze seems much more mature and wise than that of an ordinary child. In a memory, Eloise asks if Charlise is tired, but the young maid replies that she feels fortunate to be able to work in the palace. Charlise thinks to herself that her gaze, like that of an orphan turned maid, mirrors the silent despair in the Queen's expression when she was crowned. As the image of the crowned Queen appears, Charlise's thoughts converge into a single, poignant word: sister. Eloise looks up at the radiant Charlise, her mind filled with the name she first knew her by, Rose. Eloise calls out to her softly, breaking the tense silence. As Charlise sits dejectedly on the steps, Eloise explains that Charlise was the only one who smiled at her for being Eloise, not for her title. The two sit together in a quiet garden pavilion, a silent understanding passing between them. Eloise leans forward, offering Charlise a heartfelt and sincere apology. Surrounded by white roses, Charlise looks up in surprise and asks softly, "Your Majesty?" Eloise sincerely bows her head to apologize to Charlise, while the shocked Charlise can only think to call her Your Majesty. In a fluster, Charlise jumps up and protests, insisting that a queen cannot bow to a mere maid. Eloise insists it is her fault and explains that she had to apologize first because she couldn't bear the thought of losing Charlise. Charlise stares at her, rendered speechless and conflicted by the Queen's earnest plea. After a moment's hesitation, Charlise clutches her pigtails and softly agrees to accept the apology. Astonished by Charlise's acceptance, Eloise's eyes widen in relief. When Eloise seeks confirmation, Charlise gives a slight nod, and a wave of relief washes over the Queen. Wow! Overjoyed, Eloise pulls Charlise into her arms and hugs her tightly. She calls out her name, holding her close as a grateful Eloise closes her eyes and thanks Charlise warmly. Charlise returns the hug with a happy smile, admitting that she is also very fond of the queen. Her small hands clutch Eloise's sleeve, solidifying their reconciliation. Eloise calls her name again, and Charlise looks up from the embrace, responding with a questioning, "HM?" The queen steps back to look at her, takes her hand, and asks with a serious expression what she is thinking. Eloise makes a request to stop using formal honorifics with her. Charlise panics, expressing her fear of getting the address wrong or offending etiquette. She tentatively asks for permission, wondering if she can really stop using honorifics. Like issuing a royal decree, Eloise firmly insists that Charlise drop the formalities. Charlise shakes her head frantically, worried she'll be in huge trouble if she makes a mistake. With a determined look, Eloise declares that she is not ready to give up being Sister Rose yet. A relieved smile appears on Charlise's face as she finally agrees to the request. Eloise proposes that they should continue to meet and talk just like before. Eloise then changes the subject, taking Charlise's hand and asking if she has been applying the ointment on time. Charlise assures her with a bright smile that she has, but privately admits she hasn't used it much at all. Eloise doesn't look convinced and asks why her hands are still in such a state. Charlise looks at her hands sadly, admitting that it pains her to see them too, and addresses her as Sister Rose. Suddenly, Charlise collapses onto Eloise's lap, calling out Rose's name and startling the queen. Eloise chuckles softly, holding the sleeping Charlise and affectionately whispering her name. Watching Charlise sleep peacefully in her arms, the queen thinks how happy she looks. The scene shifts, and the figure of a black-haired man flashes within an ornate picture frame. With a sudden gasp, Eloise, holding the sleeping girl, looks up in alarm and shouts Charlise's name. A hand on Charlise's forehead, she realizes with wide, panicked eyes that she is in trouble. Seeing Charlise's discomfort, Eloise asks with concern what's wrong. As the girl begins to tremble, Charlise forces a smile through her tears, weakly insisting that nothing is wrong. She remembers a key detail from the original story. The kind queen she knows is destined to become the villain. The novel's protagonist is a young, black-haired man in a military uniform. This man is the crown prince, exiled by the emperor, and he is fated to kill the queen. A horrifying vision shows the crown prince plunging his sword through the queen's body. The crown prince's eyes burn with cold fury as he completes the act. The shocking memory makes Charlise gasp, covering her mouth in horror. Still feverish in Eloise's arms, Charlise realizes with dread that the crown prince is being abandoned just as in the novel. As Eloise calls her name with concern, Charlise worries that even if the queen has changed, the future will be difficult to alter. Eloise calls out to Charlise anxiously, cupping her face to get her attention. With a worried expression, Eloise notes that Charlise looks very ill. She gently touches Charlise's forehead, wondering if it was a mistake to bring her out. Charlise manages a faint smile, grabs Eloise's hand, and softly calls her Rose. Amid a sea of flowers, a vision of a healthy, vibrant, and serenely smiling Charlise appears. She thinks to herself that Sister Rose is very important to her. A new resolve forms in her mind, and she vows, "I will protect you." The scene freezes on Eloise, sitting quietly in the sunlit pavilion. Back in her room, a determined Charlise sits at her desk, a quill in hand. She decides that for Rose to live, she must factor in the crown prince. As the quill moves across the paper, she centers her plan on him. The history from the novel unfolds. The crown prince awakened the divine power of Berserk, which could have saved him from the emperor. However, the contract between the god and the emperor was coercive, bringing immense pain to the crown prince. Due to the uncontrollable power, he was imprisoned in the palace, suffering alone. Charlise realizes with a shock that the crown prince is just an 8-year-old boy right now. Holding her notes, she wonders if her new plan is really as simple as she thinks. A confident smile appears on her face as she concludes that she just needs to educate the crown prince properly, so that he won't kill Rose. With a glint in her eye, she decides she must also get close to the story's protagonist. A memory flashes of her collapsing on her bed, oblivious to the future. The narration somberly reflects on the terrible consequences of her later confidence. The scene cuts to the present, where Charlise Charlise is walking decisively down a palace corridor. She cheerfully approaches a taller maid ahead of her. A blonde maid greets Charlise, whom Charlise recognizes as the head maid. Charlise stops in her tracks, a sudden thought striking her. Realizing the queen might have influence over the crown prince, she nervously considers asking the head maid a question. Stealing her resolve, she cautiously asks if the crown prince's palace is really near the queen's. The head maid reacts with alarm, demanding to know where Charlise heard such a thing. Charlise quickly claims she heard it during training and presses on, asking if the rumor is true. The head maid sighs, lamenting that trainee maids are so hard to manage. She corrects Charlise, revealing that the crown prince's palace is actually located near the rose garden. The two maids look at each other, and the head maid realizes she has said too much. The head maid grabs Charlise and forbids her from loitering there, while Charlise wonders if that's the rumored ghost palace. The head maid explains that the crown prince's status is second only to the emperor's and warns that disrespecting him will lead to trouble. She adds grimly that Charlise could even find herself in danger, which frightens the young maid. The head maid reveals that the crown prince's divine power is so strong that he can't control it yet. Charlise clarifies that she isn't looking down on him, just afraid of his power. Another maid with light brown hair appears in a picture frame, asking if Charlise is present. The head maid ends the previous conversation while asking if something is wrong. She turns to Charlise, mentioning that the queen is still buried under a mountain of documents. Recalling Eloise's energetic morning, she expresses concern for the queen's health. Charlise clenches her fist with a determined smile, guessing there's a reason Eloise is rushing her work. With a faint smile, Charlise silently accepts responsibility for the queen's overwork. Elsewhere, the head maid tells another maid that Eloise refuses to rest or eat, just pushing through her exhaustion with a smile. Charlise overhears their conversation and stands hesitantly, and the two maids fall silent upon noticing her. The maids are debating whether someone should go tell the queen to take a break. A look of disappointment crosses Charlise's face as she realizes she can't be the one. The head maid smiles and suggests Charlise should go, since the queen has a soft spot for her, and an idea strikes Charlise. After preparing some snacks, the head maid sends Charlise to the queen's room, and the young maid happily agrees. Pushing a cart, Charlise thinks this is the perfect opportunity to ask Rose about the crown prince. She believes the difficult conversation will be easier once the queen has enjoyed some dessert. In her office, Eloise looks up from her work, annoyed at the interruption, and asks who is there. Standing before the grand doors, Charlise calmly announces that it is Charlise. The camera focuses on the doors. With a loud creak, the doors begin to open. Eloise throws the doors open and rushes out in surprise to greet her visitor. As she asks Charlise why she is there, Eloise's expression softens into a bright, happy smile. Charlise explains that the other maids were worried about her. Eloise's smile falters slightly as she asks if the head maid sent her, playfully wondering if it's because Charlise missed her. Eloise looks away, admitting that despite Charlise's concern, she still can't rest. Charlise thinks to herself that she didn't want to resort to this particular method. Putting on her most charming face, Charlise sweetly asks if Eloise can join her for some tea. Her plan works perfectly as a stunned Eloise blushes and looks down at her. Wow. Overjoyed, Eloise sweeps Charlise into her arms and happily agrees to have tea with her. As Eloise comments on how cute she is, Charlise thinks to herself that her bashful attempt at manipulation was a success. Eloise gently places Charlise on the sofa to sit, but the young maid hesitates. Eloise reassures her, pouring tea and saying she remembers Charlise likes milk tea because she remembers everything about her. As Charlise's reflection appears in the teacup, Eloise confidently states that she knows everything about her friend. As they sit down to enjoy tea and cake, her tone changes, preparing to ask Charlise something important. Eloise explains that she has a question, and Charlise wonders what it could be. With a serious expression, Eloise asks if Charlise plans to stop being a maid. The question catches Charlise off guard, leaving her shocked and confused. Still processing the sudden question, Charlise can only ask Eloise to repeat what she just said. Her mind races in confusion, internally questioning why Eloise would ask such a thing. Eloise explains that she wants to protect Charlise, not just spoil her, and that it breaks her heart to see such a small child pushing a heavy cart. Charlise replies that although it's hard, she feels most comfortable in her current role. Eloise suggests she is still young and can wait to work later, but Charlise firmly refuses. Addressing her as the queen, she puts down her cup, and Charlise explains that she is just doing what Eloise wants her to do. Charlise admits she's worried about causing a commotion, and a curious Eloise asks her to explain. She reveals her fear of backlash from the other maids over her rapid promotion. Recalling their jealous whispers, Eloise calmly asks Charlise why she thinks she was promoted so quickly, leaving Charlise speechless. Eloise states that she is well aware of the promotion rules. The probationary period is over a year unless a maid is exceptionally outstanding. She then reveals that Charlise has been at the training center for 5 years, which Charlise confirms is because she is 5 years old. Eloise laughs, finding it amusing, but Charlise seems confused by the flaw in her own logic. Eloise explains that she checked with the head of the training center, who praised Charlise's exceptional abilities, making the promotion perfectly legitimate. Struck speechless by this truth, Charlise can only manage a small, shy smile. Eloise leans forward, ready to explain her true feelings on matter. Eloise confesses she hates seeing Charlise worry and wants her to be a child, not a maid, but she respects her opinion more than her own wishes. She begins to tell Charlise how she feels, making the young maid look up at her in confusion. Charlise interrupts her with a bright smile, declaring that she is very happy and wants to keep working by Eloise's side, touching the queen's heart. Accepting her decision, Eloise hugs Charlise, promising not to stop her, but asking her to say something if she ever changes her mind. Eloise offers a plate of familiar cookies, and Charlise fondly recalls it was the first dessert she ever tasted, recognizing it as the first cookie Eloise gave her. Charlise takes one, and Eloise is overjoyed that she still remembers. With a happy smile, Charlise promises to savor the special cookie. Eloise gasps, a look of sudden realization on her face. She calls out to Charlise, who looks up in confusion. Eloise leans in, blushing, and excitedly asks if she can touch Charlise's cheeks. Charlise remembers Maid Weber doing the same thing and wonders why everyone is so fond of her cheeks. Eloise pleads for just one touch, and Charlise reluctantly agrees. Eloise gently cups her face, exclaiming how cute Charlise is and making her giggle. Eloise offers to have the kitchen bake more cookies so Charlise can have them whenever she wants. As Eloise gently pinches her cheeks, a beaming Charlise exclaims that she loves it. Overwhelmed with excitement, Eloise pulls Charlise into a tight hug, while Charlise complains that it's hard to breathe while being held. Meanwhile, Charlise realizes this is the perfect opportunity to ask her question. She looks up thoughtfully and tells Eloise she has something she's curious about. She asks if the gloomy, ghost-like palace nearby is where the crown prince lives, which makes Eloise's expression stiffen. Eloise turns and asks Charlise why she is asking about the crown prince. Charlise explains that it seems everyone avoids him and cautiously asks if it's okay to be curious about it. Eloise gets straight to the point, directly asking if Charlise hates the crown prince. Charlise looks away and softly denies it. With a sad expression, Eloise reveals that the crown prince is actually a pitiful child, which surprises Charlise. She further explains that, in fact, he lost the throne to the current emperor. Charlise nervously asks if it's okay to speak ill of the emperor, but Eloise quickly retracts her words. Eloise changes the subject, asking if the emperor hates the crown prince, while Charlise thinks it's none of her business. Eloise admits she feels guilty for compromising with the situation and pretending to know nothing. Her gaze sharpens as she points out that Charlise seems quite interested in the emperor, which flusters the young maid. Charlise panics internally, thinking her fate will be sealed by the queen's supposed jealousy from the novel. Eloise begins to remind Charlise of her previous comment about the emperor. She finishes her thought with a grim expression, calling the emperor a monster. Eloise questions Charlise's interest in an old man, prompting the maid to deny it frantically. To prove her point, Charlise eagerly declares that she likes Eloise the most in the world. The sudden, sincere confession leaves Eloise stunned and blushing. Charlise quickly clarifies that she was only curious because the emperor is her husband and asks if the topic makes her uncomfortable. Overjoyed, Eloise pulls her into another hug, insisting she's not upset at all. Eloise confesses she was just worried Charlise had her eye on someone worthless, a phrase that sticks with Charlise. Eloise continues to ramble, wondering why other ladies are so interested in the Emperor and complaining that no one listens to her advice. She laments that when she warns them to stay away from the Emperor, they misunderstand it as her being controlling. A light bulb goes off in Charlize's head as she wonders if this misunderstanding is the source of the jealous queen plotline in the novel. Thinking it's a shame the Emperor would have an affair with such a beautiful wife, Charlise finds the situation strange. Charlise realizes Eloise doesn't hate the crown prince, but feels guilty, and Eloise seems to affirm this conclusion with a knowing smile. With new resolve, Charlise silently vows to make Sister Rose happy this time. She stands resolutely among the flowers, her goal clear. The scene transitions to a panoramic view of the grand, sunlit palace. On an empty balcony, Charlise muses to herself. She wonders when the crown prince will arrive, thinking she'll get old waiting and should just run an errand. A faint sound catches her attention, and she looks up in confusion. Seeing figures in the distance, she notes that no new furniture delivery was scheduled for today. As she walks along the balcony to investigate, a voice calls her name. A blonde maid with a gentle smile asks if Charlise can help with something. Startled by the request, Charlise nervously agrees. The maid smiles kindly as Charlise follows her through the corridors. Arriving at a set of large, ornate doors, the maid asks Charlise to check the item inside. Charlise pushes the door open slightly, peering through the crack with curious eyes. Peeking through the gap, Charlise wonders what she is looking at. Her eyes sparkle with curiosity as the beautiful sight unfolds before her. Eloise proudly presents a custom-made cart, calling it a gift for Charlise, leaving the young maid utterly stunned. Eloise explains she ordered it to support Charlize's desire to work and invites her to try it out. Wow! Charlise marvels at the perfectly sized, ornately decorated cart. Overjoyed, Charlise exclaims that the height is perfect and it's completely silent, thanking Eloise profusely. Eloise feigns disappointment, asking if a simple verbal thank you is all she gets, which confuses Charlise. Realizing she should show her gratitude with actions, Charlise rushes forward and gives Eloise a hug. A maid named Hayden reminds Eloise it's time for her meeting, but the queen dismisses her, wanting to stay a little longer. Eloise tells Charlise she'll see her in the evening, and Charlise happily agrees. Eloise playfully pouts, asking if Charlise isn't sad they have to part for now. Charlise maturely states that even if she is sad, she can't interfere with Eloise's important work. Touched by her considerate words, Eloise praises Charlise for having a kind and thoughtful heart. Urged again by Hayden, Eloise reluctantly agrees it's time for her meeting. Eloise tells Charlise to wait for her, and the young maid waves goodbye as she leaves. Charlise asks another maid about Weber's whereabouts, learning she had an urgent matter and will be back later. Now alone, Charlise smiles gently to herself. For the top of the stairs, headmaid Weber calls out to Charlise, who greets her politely. Weber asks if Charlise is busy, and she confirms she is free. Weber requests a favor, asking Charlise to pick up summer clothes from the reception. Charlise happily accepts the task, and a grateful Weber thanks her, offering a handful of colorful candies as a small reward. Weber waves goodbye, telling Charlise she's counting on her and heads up the stairs. Eating the candy, Charlise thinks the clothes are probably from someone's family back home. The scene shifts to a beautiful garden as Charlise admits to herself that she's a little jealous. Charlise walks along a balcony carrying a large bag of clothes, enjoying the delicious candy. She shakes her head, deciding not to dwell on sad thoughts. She stops abruptly, struck by a sudden idea. Gazing at the thorny, gloomy palace of the crown prince, she wonders if now is the right time. Clutching the bag of clothes, she silently contemplates her next move. She comes up with a plan, deciding to use the excuse of getting lost on an errand to approach the palace. Beaming, she feels proud of her genius idea. With a nervous heart, she arrives at the intimidating gates of the crown prince's residence. Looking down from the grand gates, she thinks the place feels more like a dungeon than a palace. Intimidated by the high stone walls, she notes how terrifying they are. Alas, she feels a pang of pity for the 8-year-old child trapped alone in such a gloomy place. Her thoughts are interrupted by an unexpected discovery, and she lets out a surprised huh? She spots a small, hidden hole at the base of the wall. She crouches down, wondering if she can squeeze through the narrow opening. Deciding to risk it, she begins to crawl carefully through the hole in the wall. She tumbles through the opening, and a vision of a melancholic, dark-haired boy flashes before her eyes. A boy with messy, dark blue hair and sharp golden eyes is watching with a cold, detached expression. Crying out in pain from the hard fall, Charlise sits on the cold stone ground and complains about being tired. Just then, a pair of shoes enters her view. Swish! Suddenly, the sharp tip of a sword is pressed against her throat. The boy stands over her, pointing his sword at her with a grim expression. Trembling in fear, Charlise looks up at her attacker and asks who he is. The boy glares at her fiercely, accusing her of being an assassin sent by the Emperor. He repeats his question with intense pressure, demanding to know if she is an assassin. Charlise desperately denies the accusation, and upon being pressed, she explains she is just a maid from the Queen's palace. The boy, who has purple hair, asks suspiciously why a maid from the Queen's palace would be here, and Charlise stammers that she got lost. He presses the sword to her throat, calling her excuse nonsense. He questions her, how she could dare say she was lost after crawling through a doggy door. With tears in her eyes, Charlise weakly insists that's not what happened. The boy, confused by her sudden tears, asks why she is crying. Charlise sits on the ground sobbing, trying to explain. He impatiently tells her to stop crying, sighs, and deduces that no one would send a child as small as her to a place like this anyway. She asks hopefully if he believes her now, but he just dismisses her, telling her to leave. As she tries to stand, Charlise stumbles. Her body is trembling. He turns his head to ask what's wrong, and when she admits her legs won't move, the boy's expression fills with frustration and concern. He asks irritably if she plans to sit there all day, then offers to carry her on his back, which she gratefully accepts. On his back, Charlise is surprised by how thin he feels. She suddenly remembers her bundle and exclaims that she must bring it. A thought flashes through her mind, and she scolds herself for making the crown prince do work. She tearfully denies that it's what he thinks, while he calmly tells her to stop crying again. Holding her package, Charlise walks away from a grand building alone. Now back on his shoulders, she cheerfully offers His Highness some candy, but he refuses, suspecting it contains something else. Charlise sighs in disappointment, lamenting that she just wanted to give it to him. He places her on a cushioned seat, telling her to sit there. The two sit together on a handcart, and she thanks him softly as an attendant pulls them along. Charlise tries again, asking if His Highness really isn't going to have any candy. She insists the candy is delicious, but he remains silent and unmoved. She announces she'll eat it all herself and pops one in her mouth, and he watches her curiously. She exclaims how delicious it is, which makes him wonder how she can be so calm now after crying her eyes out just a moment ago. She explains that you have to eat sugar when you're tired, which he dismisses as just her personal opinion. Charlise shares that her mother was a court lady who passed away after giving birth to her. Realizing she is also an orphan, he falls silent, which makes Charlise wonder why his energy has suddenly vanished. She concludes that he must think she is lonely. As if she saw an opportunity, Charlise decided it was the perfect time to act, thinking she couldn't miss this golden chance, and confessed to him that she sometimes felt a little lonely. He looked at her with a melancholic expression, replying that he understood that feeling. Deep inside, Charlise cheered for successfully gaining his sympathy and pondered what to do next. Calling out to His Highness, she captured his full attention. She gently placed a piece of candy in his outstretched palm. With a brilliant smile, she told him to eat sweets when he fell down, convinced that her adorable face was irresistible. He stared at her coldly, declaring her face was comical and ugly. Pow! His cruel words struck Charlise like a physical blow. Stunned, she asked why he would say such a thing, internally defending herself by thinking she was the second most beautiful girl in the Empire. He finally spoke, pointing out that she had been calling him Crown Prince. Charlise found this to be an obvious fact, as he was the Crown Prince, and she thought his appearance and imprisoned situation matched the stories. He confirmed his identity, but asked if she knew what others called him. A narration panel revealed that she knew Diomed would eventually get his revenge and become the Emperor. Charlise, brushing aside his insult, cheerfully declared that no matter what others called him, he was the handsome Crown Prince. Diomed was visibly stunned by her words, while she decided to maintain an objective viewpoint. A blushing Diomed stammered that he had to leave immediately. Charlise explained that the head maid Weber, had sent her to fetch clothes, a name that caught Diomede's attention. When she promised to return, Diomede curtly told her not to come back. Charlise, with a gentle smile, decided to leave, but promised to return again, leaving the bewildered boy behind. She ran off cheerfully, waving goodbye, while he loudly protested behind her. Watching her disappearing figure, he wondered with a sliver of hope if she would actually return. He quickly dismissed the thought, telling himself not to expect anything from anyone. Looking at his palm, he found a single, sparkling piece of candy she had left him. After a moment of quiet contemplation, he savored the unexpected encounter. The scene shifts to the Grand Palace at dusk, where an anxious voice calls out for Charlise, asking what happened. Charlise stood proudly, despite being covered in mud from her adventure. She smiled brilliantly. Weber and Hayden questioned where she had been, and Charlise sheepishly explained that she had fallen on the way. Weber was utterly shocked to hear that Charlise had fallen. Eloise rushed over, forgetting all etiquette, anxiously asking if Charlise was hurt or okay. Charlise insisted she wasn't hurt at all, which brought Eloise relief, though Charlise thought to herself that she had nearly been scared to death. Instead, Eloise continued to look at Charlise with a worried expression. Charlise, worried she was in trouble, wondered if she was about to be scolded for playing too much. Eloise leaned in and playfully asked if Charlise had fun playing without her, catching the little maid off guard. Eloise smiled and clarified that what mattered most was that Charlise had fun, though she hoped not to be left out next time. Charlise burst into tears of relief, realizing it was a misunderstanding, and asked if she was really allowed to go out. She looked up at Eloise, her eyes filled with awe and hope. With a determined glint in her eye, Charlise made a request. She wanted to play with Eloise next time. An ecstatic Eloise pulled the muddy Charlise into a tight hug, happily agreeing to play with her, ignoring the protests of the other maids. As night fell over the palace, Charlise recalled Eloise's suffocating hug. The scene returned to the gloomy palace, where the boy stood alone by the ornate gates, waiting. He looked out beyond the gates with a doubtful expression, questioning if she would really return. His thoughts drifted to Charlise's bright, determined smile. Oof! He crushed his own hopes, thinking no one would go out of their way to see him, and tripped, distracted. The returning Charlise was sitting where she had fallen, playfully lamenting that she was hurt again. He suddenly yelled at her, and she let out a startled shriek. The boy, now identified as the crown prince, furiously questioned why she was here again. Charlise reminded him that he himself had said she would return, an observation he grudgingly acknowledged. She cleverly changed the subject, asking with an innocent expression if he had been here all this time. He fell silent, a hint of embarrassment on his face at her question. He blushed and frantically denied her assumption, which Charlise found amusing. He flailed his arms in a panic, insisting he was just passing by on a walk. To save face, he claimed he would believe her, though his inner thoughts were another matter entirely. He continued to insist he was just out for a casual stroll. Noticing her bag, he asked what she had brought. Charlise produced a basket filled with bread, an apple, and milk, apologizing for not bringing more. He looked at the offerings and quietly asked if it was really for him. She confirmed it was, adding that if he had eaten the candy she gave him, he would know it wasn't poisoned. He asked if she had eaten yesterday's candy, which she cheerfully confirmed she did, as a test. He asked what the candy tasted like, and she correctly answered strawberry, puzzled by his line of questioning. Charlise smiled to herself, pleased that he had actually eaten her gift. She cheerfully suggested they go inside to eat before the food got cold. The boy politely refused her offer, claiming he wasn't hungry. However, his flushed face indicated he was simply overwhelmed by her kindness. Charlise astutely asked if he was refusing because he was embarrassed by his palace, which drew a vehement denial from him. Seeing him stammer, she guessed correctly that his pride was the real issue. With a warm and understanding smile, she reached out and gently took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, completely flustered but unable to pull away. Charlise, holding the blushing Diomede's hand, cheerfully told him the bread she brought was delicious. They entered a vast, dilapidated hall, covered in dust and thick cobwebs. The terrifying reflection of a giant spider was mirrored in Charlize's wide, horrified eyes. Charlise let out a piercing scream, hiding behind the unfazed Diamide. Charlise quickly recovered, declaring that they must clean up after eating and frantically looked for cleaning supplies. Diamide calmly ignored her, guiding her towards the dining room as she shrieked at him in surprise. The heavy doors to the dining room swung open. Wow! They gazed upon a magnificent dining room, where a long table was set with a lavish, gleaming feast. Charlise wondered why he would be starving with so much food, but Diamide grimly told her it was not to be eaten. Undeterred, Charlise declared that if he wouldn't eat it, she would, and moved towards the table. Her hand reached for a perfectly roasted chicken, commenting on how delicious it looked. Smack! Diamide suddenly slapped her hand away with the flat of a large knife, barking at her not to touch it. He glared at her, repeating his warning, leaving Charlise stunned and questioning his actions. A voice explained that if a helpless life couldn't endure the situation, they should just eat and disappear. Diamide looked up, his expression melancholic and pained, lost in thought. Charlise quietly clutched the strap of her bag. Her mind racing, she asked what he usually ate, and he explained that the Emperor only provided just enough to keep him alive. A chill ran down Charlize's spine as she realized he was given meager provisions. Not real food. Diamide cynically explained that it would be troublesome if he starved, whereas his death by poison could easily be covered up as an illness. He pointed to a cabinet, inviting her to see the provisions for herself. Inside were only a few withered carrots, a rotten apple, and a bag of dry pills. The sight horrified Charlise, and tears welled in her eyes as she realized he had been living like this for 5 years. The untouched, lavish feast on the table served as a cruel and silent mockery. Diamide told her she shouldn't be shocked by his situation. Charlise tearfully insisted that this treatment was completely wrong. As Diamide looked away, a new resolve formed within her. She now decided she would save Diamide. She firmly believed that no one, for any reason, deserved to be treated this way. She clenched her fists, silently questioning the injustice of his circumstances. She approached him, admitting she didn't understand her own feelings, but knew it was wrong to live just to survive. She concluded her thoughts, certain this was not a burden an 8-year-old should bear. Charlise looked at Diamide with determination, promising to bring him proper food regularly from now on. She replied that it was normal for humans to help each other, leaving him to ponder the meaning of her words. With a brilliant smile, Charlise gently suggested they eat the bread she brought together. Diamide stared at her, his hardened expression softening, clearly moved by her kindness. Looking around the gloomy room, Charlise was struck by an idea, and noting the nice weather, she suggested eating outside, asking for his opinion. He quietly agreed. She smiled and turned to him, asking him to repeat himself, and a flustered Diamide said, "I said okay." The scene shifts to the beautiful palace courtyard, sunny and filled with butterflies. Charlise ran to his sunny clearing by the water, cheerfully exclaiming how nice the weather was. Noticing Diamide still standing in the doorway, she turned and called out his title. He remained silent, watching her with his arms crossed, hesitant to step out. Charlise ran back and gently grabbed his sleeve. Surprised, he allowed her to pull him out of the shadows and into the bright sunlight. She cheerfully encouraged him to join her, pulling him fully into the beautiful clearing. She leaned in with a warm smile and asked if he could feel the warmth of the sun. Diamide blushed, a faint, gentle smile gracing his lips. Finally looking a bit more at ease, Charlise happily announced she would make him sandwich. As if by magic, she assembled a sandwich with fresh ingredients: bread, sauce, cheese, lettuce, tomato, and a fried egg. She proudly presented the finished sandwich to the watching Diamide, inviting him to take a bite. Diamide happily took a large bite of the sandwich, and Charlise, noticing a crumb on his face, offered to wipe it off for his highness. This startled him, and a flustered Diamide frantically shook his head, insisting he could clean it himself. Charlise smiled warmly, while Diamide continued to pout as he chewed. Sitting on the sunny grass, Charlise asked if he wanted another sandwich, and Diamide quietly agreed to just one. He closed his eyes in contentment, savoring the delicious sandwich. Startled, Charlise looked up to see a hand reaching for her face. Diamide turned away, gruffly telling her to give him a handkerchief. Taking the hint, Charlise cheerfully offered him some milk instead. Diamide stared at the bottle she offered, surrounded by a shimmering aura. He thanked her, but said she didn't have to take care of him, which confused Charlise, as it was her job. Looking at her small frame, he explained that, as a young child, she was the one who needed to be taken care of. Charlise smiled confidently. She replied that while she was young, it was still her job to be a maid. Dynamite took a sip of milk and asked her age, to which she calmly stated she was 5 years old. He sputtered in surprise and demanded confirmation, to which she politely replied, "Yes, Your Highness." A painful memory surfaced of a woman lamenting how the palace treated children of that age. Charlise burst into a fit of laughter, confusing the sweating Dynamite. She explained that he had said the exact same thing as the queen. The mention of the queen seemed to strike a nerve, as Dynamite looked back at her with a grim expression. Realizing her mistake, Charlise guessed that His Highness must not like the queen. She worried she had made him uncomfortable by bringing up the queen for nothing. And just as she was wondering how to make him like the queen, Dynamite shouted, "Hey, whoa." He leaned in and yelled, "Hey," startling her and making her jump. He demanded to know her name, leaving her momentarily speechless. He explained that he couldn't just call her "Hey" or "You" forever. With a brilliant smile, she happily introduced herself as Charlise. Dynamite thoughtfully repeated the name Charlise to himself. He declared she had a nice name, unlike her face, an insult that struck her like a lightning bolt. Annoyed, Charlise thought that if he didn't learn to say nice things, thorns would grow in his mouth. He added that the name Charlise didn't suit her, surprising her again. She was furious. She argued that a name had nothing to do with whether someone was a child or an adult. She thought to herself that she hated him and wanted to hit him, but couldn't because he was a prince. He suddenly announced that he would call her Charlise from now on, catching her completely off guard. Dynamite smirked, seeming to enjoy her confused reaction. Charlise puffed out her cheeks, silently fuming. He asked if she didn't want him to call her by her name, which she denied. He leaned in with a sincere smile and asked what was wrong. Pouting, Charlise suggested it would be nice if His Highness could speak more kindly. She listed his offenses, calling her ugly, insulting her name, and threatening her when they first met. Tears welled in her eyes as she recalled his past cruelty. Dynamite fell silent, shocked, realizing the weight of his words. He frantically tried to take back what he had said. He insisted he had only said her name was nice and never called her strange. He stammered that it was just because she was a child and he meant no harm. He desperately shouted that he had no reason to hate her. The scene shifts to a vast, dark, and empty bedroom. The frame shows Dynamite sitting alone in the desolate and lonely room. Dynamite stood alone in the dark room, gazing at a large, ornate family portrait. The scene fades into a dark, shimmering abyss, marking a transition. Charlise believed he had come back specifically to see her. Thump! He sat down beside her on the sunny grass, and a blushing Dynamite shyly confessed that he was really happy she had come back to see him. He repeated with heartfelt emotion that he was so glad she had come to see him. He confided that she was the first person to visit him since he came to this palace. Surprised by his confession, Charlise simply replied that she understood. The narration reflected on how lonely and alone Dynamite had been until now. Charlise hesitated to take his hand, thinking it might be too presumptuous given his royal status. Dynamite looked moved, a single tear glistening in his eye. Charlise promised to visit often, and a content Dynamite quietly agreed. From the magnificent palace courtyard, a voice called out for the prince. Charlise recalled visiting the prince's palace every day, waving to Dynamite from a distance. He turned with a warm smile and waved back at her. Charlise clenched her fists in excitement, feeling a sense of pure, unbridled joy. Sitting together again, Charlise asked Dynamite if he wanted dessert, and he curiously asked what that was. Tajda. She proudly revealed a delicate milk pudding topped with a cherry. Dynamite's eyes lit up as Charlise reminded him to eat it with the caramel syrup. He admitted it was his first time seeing a pudding, observing a wobbly piece on his spoon with curiosity. As he took his first bite, Charlise enthusiastically told him how delicious it was and urged him to try it. Dynamite, overcome by the taste, savored the pudding with a look of pure bliss. He agreed it was delicious, and she happily told him to eat more. A sudden thought made Charlise blush. She wondered if her face looked that blissful when the queen gave her cookies. Charlise offered him some as she munched on a cookie, but he refused, saying the pudding was for him. He trailed off, looking hesitant to finish the rest by himself. Charlise reassured him it was okay and asked if he liked the pudding. Diomed happily nodded, confirming it was delicious. Charlise confessed with a sad expression that she didn't like eating alone. Diomed firmly stated that if she wasn't eating, then he wouldn't either. She insisted the pudding was for him, but he simply repeated that he didn't like eating alone. With newfound determination, Diomed offered the pudding, asking Charlise to eat it with him. Stunned by his direct invitation, Charlise stared at the offered dessert. They both smiled and agreed to eat the pudding together. With a brilliant, charming smile, Diomed fed her a spoonful. "Oh my!" Charlise was shocked by his gesture, blushing furiously. Diomed, confused by her reaction, asked her what was wrong. She suddenly grabbed him, demanding to know what had happened. She leaned in and declared that his beauty was too precious to be hidden by a frown, which bewildered him. He smiled proudly, finally understanding that she found him handsome. Charlise told him that now that he knew he was handsome, she would hold back for now, confusing him again. She changed the subject, pointing out they didn't have a second spoon for the pudding. Diomed casually suggested sharing one, but Charlise was aghast at such a breach of royal etiquette. He smiled and brushed off her concerns, holding the spoon out to her. Realizing this must be the law of sharing dessert, she prepared to accept. Diomed playfully complained that his arm was getting sore. As she leaned in cautiously, thump, Charlise let go of her hesitation and took a bite of the pudding. She savored the taste in sweet, blissful silence. Diomed smiled brilliantly, pleased with her reaction, and declared it was very delicious. Diomed offered a spoonful of pudding, a sweet and simple offering. Thump, thump. Charlise clenched her fists, her heart pounding from his unexpected gesture. A panicked Charlise thought she must be crazy to have such a reaction, while a worried Diomed called her name. Blushing furiously, she thought to herself that she was actually getting flustered by an 8-year-old. Diomed leaned in, genuinely worried, and asked if she was okay. He noted that her sudden change was strange, as she was fine just a moment ago. The scene shifts to the palace as the narrator wonders what happened to startle her so much. On another day, Charlise arrived with her basket, happily announcing she had brought pancakes for His Highness. She found their usual meeting spot empty, seeing only a faint, glowing outline where he should have been, surrounded by question marks. A confused Charlise wondered where Diomed could be. She walked through the empty palace courtyard, calling for His Highness to no avail. Creak. She peeked through a large gate, asking if the prince was inside. Anxious about his disappearance, she remembered he always waited for her alone by the wall. A rat scurried across the desolate stone floor, highlighting the palace's disrepair. The vast, empty castle loomed, amplifying the loneliness of her solitary search. Standing at the foot of a grand staircase, she noticed the place was crawling with rats. Remembering the large spider she had seen before, a worrying thought began to form in her mind. She looked up in shock, her thoughts consumed by the massive cobweb on the ceiling. Staring at the thick cobweb, she dryly commented that it could be used for curtains. Charlise clenched her fists with determination, deciding to clean the ceiling today. She struggled under the weight of a heavy ladder and broom, thinking she might die of exhaustion just from moving them. Creak! She peered nervously through the doorway, uneasy about climbing the old ladder. She psyched herself up, brushing aside her fear and declaring it was no big deal. The rickety old ladder creaked ominously as it was set in place. With a broom in hand, she heroically prepared to face her 8-legged foes, telling the spiders to wait as she began to sweep. She thought of Diomed as she swept, thinking he was a cold person. She continued to clean with determination, thinking that if she could just get this done. She raised her broom with a triumphant smile, proudly declaring the job was done. Snap! The rung of the old ladder broke beneath her feet. Ah! Charlise screamed as she plummeted towards the ground. Mid-fall, she worried that if she got seriously hurt, the queen would find out about her visits. Her last thought before impact was a desperate prayer not to be seriously injured. The scene blurred, capturing the violent motion of her fall. Thud! A loud thud echoed as her fall came to a sudden, jarring halt. She opened her eyes, blinking in disbelief, realizing she was completely unharmed. She was held securely in Diomed's arms, dazedly asking how he got there while he cried out her name in alarm. He ignored her question, instead demanding to know if she had really moved that dangerous old ladder from the warehouse. A frustrated Diomed sat on the floor, scolding her for being so bold as to use something so dilapidated. Charlise obediently apologized, but he cut her off, asking what exactly she was apologizing for. She explained that she had caused him trouble, an answer that seemed to confuse Diomed. She panicked internally, realizing that if the queen found out, they would both be in trouble. Charlise apologized sincerely, telling Diomed he could scold her. Diomed looked at her with a complicated expression, called her name, and then fell silent. He sighed and turned away, telling her to just forget about it. Charlise nervously grabbed his hand, asking if he was mad at her. He whipped around, demanding to know what she took him for, leaving her stunned. He asked if she really thought he was angry because her getting hurt would cause him trouble. He confessed to her that she was the first good person he had met in his 5 years of confinement, which shocked her. He emotionally explained that, of course, he would be worried if such a person got hurt. After his confession, Diomed changed the subject and called her again, to which she responded attentively. Diomed asked Charlise if she didn't want to see him because he had threatened her with a sword. This left her speechless. As he began to elaborate, she quickly cut him off, insisting that wasn't the reason at all. Charlise, clutching her hands, admitted that she was scared at first because she really thought she was going to die. Framed by flowers, she looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, emphasizing her sincerity. Diomed looked away, hesitantly asking if that meant she forgave him. As he caught her falling body, Charlise gently held his hand and agreed, asking him not to say things that hurt himself anymore. Sitting in a field of magical blue flowers, Diomed made a silent promise. On a distant balcony, a blonde maid was watching them with a stern and disapproving gaze. The scene fades to a starry sky, marking the passage of time. The grand, magnificent palace was illuminated against the twilight sky. A red-haired woman looked back with an annoyed expression, questioning the maid. The maid who was observing earlier reported to the woman that Charlise visits the crown prince every day. In an exclusive interview with ESPN SportsCenter, Lionel Messi announced his decision to join Inter Miami for the next season. The news comes after weeks of speculation about the soccer superstar's next career move. Messi, who spent most of his career with Barcelona, stated that his desire for a new challenge and a change of scenery were reasons for his move to the MLS. He also mentioned that the opportunity to promote the sport of soccer in the United States was a motivating factor. Inter Miami fans are ecstatic about the signing, with many believing Messi's arrival will elevate the team's performance and bring unprecedented attention to the league. Messi is expected to make his debut for Inter Miami in July, and tickets for his first match are already in high demand. Charlise cheerfully approached a brown-haired maid, announcing that she had brought the washed laundry. The maid thanked Charlise for carrying such a heavy load, and Charlise asked if there was anything else to do. The maid smiled warmly and told Charlise it was time to eat and that she should go have lunch. The maid asked if she wasn't going to eat, but Charlise explained she would eat after delivering the clothes to the laundry room. Charlise offered to deliver the clothes first, and the maid thanked her for her help. A foot in an ornate, jeweled shoe stepped into the grass. With a rustling sound, the maid looked up in confusion, letting out a questioning huh. A red-haired woman suddenly appeared with a sinister smile, causing the maid to gasp in fright. The woman placed a finger to her lips, silencing the terrified maid with a soft shoo. The woman praised the maid's work ethic and promised an extra salary, while thinking to herself that it wasn't because she was nice to Charlise. The woman turned and left with a determined look, her plans seemingly set in motion. The maid was left alone, bewildered, wondering what on earth had just happened. In the storage room, Charlise cheerfully inspects some supplies while a red-haired woman, hiding behind the door and peeking, ponders what else she needs for her plan. Charlise happily lifts a basket of bread, muttering aloud if it will be enough. The woman continues to peek at Charlise from the doorway. Charlise suddenly remembers another item she needs to grab, completely unaware she is being watched. The woman watches from her hiding spot as Charlise heads deeper into the storage room. The woman huffs impatiently, fiddling with a brooch on her dress. But her frustration melts away as she is overcome with emotion, sighing to herself about how cute Charlise is. She leans against the wall and takes a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Her expression turns serious as she considers the situation, realizing that no matter how cute Charlise is, a vision of a man in a crown warns that it is dangerous to enter and leave the crown prince's palace. In front of the gloomy palace gates, Charlise promises to return tomorrow, while the woman urges her to be careful. Charlise pouts as she climbs through a hole in the stone wall, complaining that she is tired of taking this route. Halfway through, she freezes, her eyes widening in shock. The queen is standing before her with her arms crossed. A stunned Charlise stammers, asking Her Majesty why she is here. The queen simply places a finger to her lips, shushing her. The queen looks down at the teary-eyed girl and calmly instructs her to follow quietly. Charlise panics, thinking the queen must be terribly disappointed in her. She clutches her basket tightly, realizing she cannot tell the truth, as she is the only one who knows the full story and is doing this to protect the queen. The queen calls her name, and Charlise turns back, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. A voice from behind the wall asks if the queen is out there, and she confirms it. The queen stands before Charlise and a hiding Diomed, stating that this is the first time they have spoken. A sweating Diomed confirms this, wondering strangely if the queen is here to scold Charlise. Diomed addresses the queen respectfully, acknowledging that it must be uncomfortable for her to speak with him. He continues after a pause, preparing to explain why he is speaking to her now. Diomed pleads with the queen, asking her not to blame Charlise for what has happened. As Charlise watches in anguish, Diomed explains that she had tried to stay away for the queen's sake. He makes the shocking confession that he was the one who threatened Charlise to force her to keep visiting. Charlise desperately tries to deny his claim, but Diomed orders her to stay out of it. He makes a symbolic gesture to push her away, intending to take all the blame himself. Diomed declares that he will never see Charlise again, leaving her utterly stunned. Her expression turns sorrowful as she tries to process his heartbreaking and resolute words. Charlise looks up at the queen, who observes her with a silent, unreadable expression. The queen agrees to consider the crown prince's offer and calmly tells Charlise it is time to leave. As she leaves the desolate palace, Charlise looks back one last time, mournfully whispering the prince's title. The queen calls Charlise's name. In a grand office, Charlise stands silently before the queen, who is seated behind her desk. Feeling nervous and overwhelmed, Charlise begins to stammer out an explanation. The queen watches her quietly, her calm demeanor betraying no thoughts. Charlise explains that she visited the crown prince because he seemed pitiful. The queen repeats the answer curiously. Charlise lowers her head, admitting it was wrong for a lowly maid to overstep her bounds. She looks up earnestly, confessing that she did it because she felt his situation was similar to her own. The queen softly repeats Charlise's self-deprecating words, her clasped hands tightening slightly. Charlise continues to bow, offering a deep and sincere apology for her transgression. The queen agrees that Charlise was wrong to violate the emperor's strict decree, regardless of her motives. She closes her eyes, stating that because of this, she has no choice but to issue a punishment. Expecting the worst, Charlise looks up with a bright smile, ready to accept any punishment. A knowing smile touches the queen's lips as she formally decides on Charlise's punishment. Just as Charlise braces herself, the queen surprises her by asking a completely different question. Do you hate me? The unexpected question catches Charlise off guard, leaving her stunned into silence. The queen maintains a stern, serious expression, awaiting Charlise's answer. Charlise thinks about how good the queen has always been to her and feels she cannot explain the real reason. As the queen begins to announce her judgment, Charlise squeezes her eyes shut in anticipation. Charlise looks up, utterly confused, and asks the queen to repeat what she just said. The queen smiles gently, revealing that she, too, thinks the emperor is too harsh on the crown prince. She continues, saying it would be beneficial if someone from her side could show the crown prince some kindness. Stunned by the turn of events, Charlise asks if the queen is truly giving her permission. The queen instructs her to stop sneaking around and to visit Diomed openly and boldly from now on. She confirms her command by lightly touching the bow on Charlise's dress, while Charlise stammers in disbelief. The queen gives her official protection, telling Charlise to say she has her direct permission if questioned. When Charlise worries about the emperor's wrath, the queen cuts her off sharply. She states that dealing with the emperor is her responsibility, not something a child should worry about. The queen gently pats her head, affirming her affection for Charlise, who marvels at her benevolence. The queen adds with a firm smile that once she makes a decision, she does not change her mind. She rises from her chair, speaking with the absolute authority of her title and position. The queen declares that it is her duty to protect the crown prince, calling it the emperor's only fault. Charlise understands that the queen's words are not just for comfort, but stem from genuine conviction. Seeing the queen's somber expression, Charlise realizes she is truly worried about Dynamite. The queen then says there is one more thing Charlise needs to know. This piques her curiosity. The queen puts her hands on her hips and sternly tells Charlise to stop belittling herself. She leans in to remind Charlise that as her most favored maid, she must have confidence. The queen explains that by demeaning herself, Charlise is demeaning the queen who loves her. Moved by the queen's profound compassion, tears begin to stream from Charlise's eyes. The queen, slightly flustered by the sudden tears, asks what is wrong, but Charlise is too choked up to speak. Charlise wipes her tears with a grateful smile and expresses her heartfelt thanks, leaving the queen confused. Charlise, with tears streaming down her face, confesses to Eloise that she must have disappointed her, begging not to be abandoned. Eloise looks down at Charlise and asks if she's been worried about being abandoned all this time. Eloise gently reassures the crying Charlise, saying she would never abandon her and telling her not to worry. Eloise softly invites a hesitant Charlise to come closer, to give her a hug. As Charlise nervously clutches her dress, Eloise gently encourages her, saying it is okay to come here. Eloise pulls Charlise into a warm, comforting embrace. Eloise holds her tightly, telling Charlise to stop thinking such useless things, and she quietly agrees. After a moment, Weber approaches Eloise with a reluctant smile, asking if she is sure about this decision. Weber hands Eloise a document, knowingly stating that she understands its contents. Eloise takes a sip of her drink and calmly admits that the emperor will be displeased with her actions. Eloise explains to a teary-eyed Weber that she simply could not ignore Charlise's pained expression. She sets down her cup and continues her thoughts. Eloise reveals to a surprised Weber that she heard the Crown Prince's voice for the first time. She remarks that his voice sounded much more mature than his age and notes his isolated state. She looks out the window at Dynamite, remembering the moment someone stood up to protect Charlise. Eloise gravely admits that she, too, is one of the people who took the Crown Prince's position from him. This shocks Weber. Her expression hardens with resolve. A flashback begins, recalling the time of the previous emperor's death. A much younger Dynamite cries sorrowfully behind an enormous crown. He continues to weep while standing before what appears to be the late emperor's coffin. A sword is suddenly pointed at the terrified 3-year-old prince. The narration reveals he was imprisoned at that young age, overseen by a man with a red beard. His throne was forcibly taken. The camera focuses on the determined eyes of the one who seized the throne. His eyes widen with a hint of insight or surprise. The current emperor is revealed to be holding the crown that once belonged to Dynamite. It is explained that Eloise's father, the Duke of Rochester, had helped the emperor seize power before he passed away. After her father's death, his successor was not as strong a supporter of the emperor, creating a political rift. Despite the tense relationship, the Rochester family remains at the top of the aristocracy. The emperor, trapped by his reliance on the family, still needs their power. Political tensions continue to simmer beneath the surface. Eloise decides she will take care of the crown prince, positioning herself as a key link between the two powers. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she clenches her fist, certain that the emperor can never harm her. The scene transitions, leaving Eloise alone with her thoughts. The focus shifts back to the empty halls of Diomede's desolate palace. Diomede watches a bird from his window, quietly wondering if Charlise is all right, before dismissing the thought. He walks through the palace carrying a wooden box, his expression unreadable. He glances at his meager and rotting food supply, a grim look on his face. He recalls a flash of memory of Charlise handing him something, still struck by her kindness. With a whoosh, he turns and calls out for Charlise, only to find the room empty. The grand dining hall is silent and empty. Walking down the main staircase, Diamide reflects that he had always expected to be alone for the rest of his life. He stops, his gaze fixed on a point in the distance. He vividly remembers the moment he caught Charlise when she fell from the ladder. He stands quietly in that very spot, lost in the memory of their meeting. His thoughts then drift to the memory of having dinner with her. Now, standing outside, he realizes he has made many memories with Charlise in different places. As he walks through the overgrown garden, he understands that her presence lingers everywhere he goes. He stops before a stone wall, his journey interrupted. He touches the wall, pleading for Charlise not to avoid him, while also hating the thought of being forgotten. Touching the stone wall, he is determined never to be alone again. A voice calls his title, and Diamide turns to look. Charlise stands before him, formally addressing him as the crown prince. Diamide turns in surprise, his eyes wide at her unexpected return. In the sunlit garden, Charlise has returned for him, finding him by the palace wall. She watches him with a silent, steady gaze. Diamide, thinking he is hallucinating from loneliness, wonders if he is seeing a vision of her and asks if she is real. His doubt deepens as he stares at her, questioning what he sees. Charlise asks with a bright smile if he is unhappy to see her again. Beaming with joy, she confesses that she really wanted to see him. Diamide approaches, asking if it is really Charlise, and she gently confirms her presence. He reflects that she is the first person to bring warmth into his life. The image of Charlise's bright, happy smile fills his mind. Later, they sit together for a picnic, and she gets his attention. Charlise worriedly asks if he has not been sleeping well, but he seems confused by her question. She points to the dark circles under his eyes and his chapped lips, her concern growing. With tears welling in her eyes, she gently asks if he is unwell. Diamide smiles softly, reassuring her that her safety is what matters most. Touched by his words, Charlise blushes and shyly lowers her head. He asks if she came in secret, and she hesitates before answering. Charlise proudly announces that the queen herself gave her permission, which startles Diamide. She begins to explain through a cheesy flashback, narrating her confusion over the bread incident. The flashback shows Eloise acting delighted when Charlise offers her a strawberry tart. Her story concludes with the memory of Eloise giving her a warm hug. Back in the present, Charlise cheerfully concludes that everything is fine now. Diamide is lost in thought, processing the story of her receiving the queen's approval. He suddenly notices her swollen eyes, prompting a surprised reaction from Charlise. Flustered, Charlise complains that he is making fun of her for being worried, while he bursts into a fit of laughter. She playfully accuses him of laughing so hard he is crying. He denies it through his laughter, and she quips that if he cried, he would look just like her. As he continues to insist he is not crying, Charlise playfully concedes. Diamide breaks into a relieved and happy smile, while Charlise jokingly warns him not to tease her anymore. The scene shifts to the two of them sitting at a table inside. Charlise excitedly presents a tray filled with delicious food prepared by the maids. She points to the tray, noting that it includes his favorite meat dish, capturing his full attention. Diamide stares at the food, while a teary-eyed Charlise quietly observes his reaction. She asks if she said something wrong, but he just turns his head away, dismissing her concern. Diamide smiles gently and explains that he feels he has not taken good enough care of her in return. He mentions that she is always so considerate of his tastes. As he picks up the food tray, he grips it with renewed determination. Diamide announces with a bright, sincere smile that today he will be the one to take complete care of her. Stunned by his declaration, Charlise can only respond with a confused, "What?" Diamide stands on a chair, holding the tray high, and insists on serving her. He tells her not to move and asks her to choose between meat and vegetables. Charlise, feeling overwhelmed and nervous, hesitates to answer his question. After she chooses the meat, he playfully overrules her, insisting she must eat her vegetables first. He offers a piece of lettuce on a fork to a flustered Charlise. She nervously tries to refuse, but he insists it is his turn to take care of her. The fork with the vegetable moves closer, demonstrating his playful resolve. At his insistence, Charlise reluctantly takes a bite, protesting that she prefers meat. She is pleasantly surprised, realizing the vegetable is more delicious than she expected. With her rosy cheeks puffed out, Charlise looks completely absorbed in the tasty treat. Diamide watches her reaction with a knowing, gentle smile. He playfully pokes her cheek, teasing that it is so full it looks like it might burst. Charlise laughs and playfully blames him for making her cheeks so full. As he continues to tease her, she blushes and looks at his smiling face, quietly asking why he's grinning like that. He compares her to a squirrel, and the image pops into her head as she repeats his words in disbelief. Flustered, Charlise asks if she is not even a person anymore, just as he offers her a piece of meat. As a reward for eating her vegetables, Dynamite happily offers her the piece of meat. Charlise eats the meat, finding it strange that he keeps treating her like a child. She continues to chew thoughtfully, her expression a mix of contentment and confusion. Charlise suddenly asks seriously why he is not eating with her and is only feeding her. Dynamite casually brushes off her concern, telling her not to worry and that he will eat when he feels like it. Charlise thinks about how embarrassing it is for a maid to be served by the crown prince. Mortified by the situation, she covers her face in embarrassment. Despite this, she inwardly admits the food is delicious and imagines them sharing a happy meal together. Back in reality, she scolds herself for such improper thoughts. Charlise pouts and insists that it is his turn to eat something now. He freezes now, his playful expression gone, as he watches her intently. Thump, thump. Charlise is startled to hear a voice that is not his. A red-haired woman walks in, her voice announcing that she only gave Charlise permission to visit the palace. She sharply points out that she never gave Charlise permission to feed the crown prince. This infuriates Dynamite. In a state of utter panic, Charlise wonders why the queen has suddenly appeared. The queen calls out sternly to Charlise, who nervously answers in quick succession. Charlise is filled with dread, worrying she has disappointed the queen again. The queen thinks sullenly that she has not even had a chance to feed Charlise herself yet. A flash of lightning highlights Dynamite's shocked and furious expression. Charlise timidly tries to get Dynamite's attention. Not knowing what to do, Dynamite proudly proclaims that he also fed her pudding before the queen ever did. The queen and a blonde maid are utterly shocked by his bold declaration. The queen's face darkens with rage, while Dynamite smirks triumphantly, leaving a bewildered Charlise caught between them. Charlise, with tears in her eyes, wonders why everyone is acting so strangely. A tense standoff begins as the queen glares at Dynamite, who returns her gaze with a defiant smile. The queen coldly addresses the crown prince, and he responds calmly. The queen leans in and pointedly asks if he is bragging about how many times he has fed Charlise. Dynamite suddenly grows nervous, sweating as he asks what she means by that question. The queen triumphantly boasts that she and Charlise have even slept in the same bed. This revelation leaves both Dynamite and Charlise completely stunned. The queen looks smug while Dynamite appears devastated, and a flustered Charlise denies it. The blonde maid quietly corrects her, saying that Charlise actually decided to sleep with her. Unfazed, the queen suddenly sweeps Charlise into her arms. She announces to Dynamite that she sleeps especially well when holding Charlise. Charlise is mortified and bewildered by the queen's actions. Dynamite trembles, his face clouded with frustration and jealousy. He clenches his fists tightly, muttering under his breath. Dynamite looks up with a sharp smile and asks if the queen came all this way, just to tell him that. The queen, holding Charlise, smiles sweetly and replies that he seems quite bothered by her visit. A silent war erupts between the queen and Dynamite, with a small and terrified Charlise caught in the middle. Charlise looks from the queen holding her to Dynamite across the room, completely baffled by their rivalry. Charlise, wearing a red hood, joyfully calls out to Madame Hayden. A kind blonde maid, identified as Madame Hayden, smiles and waves in response. Dynamite looks nervous, recalling that the queen had ordered the head maid to summon him. As the queen leads the way, a sweating Dynamite asks her what is wrong. The queen stops and announces that His Majesty the Emperor is looking for him, shocking both Charlise and Dynamite. Charlise lowers her head, blaming herself for causing trouble between the queen and the Emperor. A voice asks how long the Emperor has been there, and another confirms he just arrived and is waiting in the queen's palace. The queen smiles, realizing the Emperor's rare visit means her meeting with Dynamite has had an impact. The queen tells Charlise to go back soon, and says she will go see the Emperor first, as Madame Hayden looks on. Charlise worriedly clutches the queen's dress, asking if she should go with her. The queen reassures a still hesitant Charlise, saying this is something for the adults to handle. Diomed watches the queen leave with a worried expression. Diomed, crestfallen, offers the queen a sincere apology. The queen turns back and asks why he is apologizing. Diomed says he is sorry that she will now suffer the emperor's wrath because of him, but the queen calmly says no. She dismisses his concerns, telling him there is nothing to apologize for. The queen stands before them and declares that, as the queen, it is her duty to look after the crown prince. She gently tells a blushing Diomed that he has no reason to feel guilty, as she is simply fulfilling her duty. The queen instructs Madame Hayden to see Charlise off, and then she walks off to face the emperor. Charlise looks up at Diomed with a worried expression. She quietly asks His Highness what happened when he spoke with the queen. Diomed stares at the closed doors and simply says it was nothing. He turns to Charlise with a gentle smile, admitting that he now understands why she likes the queen so much. Diomed's expression is warm and grateful as he smiles. Charlise returns his smile with a happy, blushing face, but her joyful expression then fades, replaced by deep worry. A blonde maid stands beside Diomed, thinking that while it is good he can see the queen's kindness, she is still worried. She and Diomed stand before the grand hall, both concerned about whether the queen will be all right. Meeting the emperor in a lavish room, the emperor takes a sip of tea and declares it tastes good. He turns to the queen with a pleasant smile and asks for her opinion. The queen calmly takes a sip from her own cup and agrees. The two sit at opposite ends of a long table, the atmosphere between them cold and distant. A sharp clink sounds as the queen places her teacup on its saucer. The emperor expresses his pleasure that she could come, adding that it is a husband's duty to look after his wife. His pleasant demeanor shifts to a more serious gaze as he awaits a response. He reveals he has heard something interesting, causing the queen to worry he has found out about her past, but he unexpectedly asks what she means. He clarifies with a knowing smirk that he is referring to her decision to take care of the crown prince. The queen quietly and nervously sips her tea, hiding her thoughts. A panel officially identifies the emperor's name as Vincent de Windsor. The queen thinks to herself that Vincent only sees her as a political link to the Rochester family. Vincent claims he is not interfering, just worried about the rumors that are circulating. To protect Charlise, the queen hides her true motives, smiling sweetly and insisting it is all for Vincent's sake. Vincent gives a skeptical smirk, questioning if her actions are truly for him. The queen challenges him directly, pointing out that he has been neglecting the crown prince all this time. A silent and tense standoff occurs between Vincent and the queen. The vast, ornate room emphasizes the emotional distance between the royal couple. Vincent's expression hardens as he asks if she is blaming him. The queen, with a confident and knowing smile, calmly denies his accusation. Vincent protests dismissively that the crown prince is just a child, but the queen counters that children eventually become adults. She sharply sets down her cup, adding that grudges from childhood last a long time. Vincent looks down at the queen from the grand staircase, thinking about this good deed for the emperor. As he thinks, he nervously adjusts his sleeves, repeating the words "a good deed" to himself. He continues his strategic thinking, concluding that the queen's direct involvement will protect the crown prince's pride. Vincent flinches as he considers the dangerous possibility that the crown prince might grow to hate him, threatening the line of succession. The queen tells him with a bright, knowing smile that he needs to start planning carefully. Vincent closes his eyes, quietly considering her bold political move. He concedes, entrusting both the queen and the crown prince to her care and thanking her for her loyalty. The queen gives a sly smile, inwardly scoffing at his excuse of being busy with state affairs. She continues to think to herself that he is a shameless liar for pushing his duties onto his ministers. The scene transitions to a brightly lit, magnificent palace hall. Charlise walks down a palace corridor carrying a basket. She suddenly stops, her expression curious, as if she has noticed something ahead. Vincent appears in the hall, flanked by two silhouetted attendants. Charlise bows deeply, formally greeting His Majesty the Emperor. A single tear falls from her eye as she holds her bowed position in his presence. Vincent glances down at the small, bowing maid as he passes by. Charlise watched the emperor and his entourage walk away down the long corridor, and in her memory, she recalled the first time she saw him, thinking he looked exactly as described in the novel. Her younger self wore a troubled expression, remembering her assessment of him, a handsome face that concealed sinister intentions. Back in the present, Charlise hurried on her way, her heart full of worry for the queen. As she reached a grand door, a quick knock sounded, and a voice from within invited her in. The door creaked open, and Charlise timidly peered inside, calling for Her Majesty, the Queen. The Queen greeted her with a warm and welcoming smile, noting her early return. The Queen gestured to a table laden with desserts, inviting the silent Charlise to come and sit. The Queen waited patiently, her expression questioning Charlise's hesitation. With a worried look, Charlise finally spoke, asking if the Queen was in trouble because of her. The Queen's smile faded, replaced by a more serious, contemplative expression. She quickly reassured Charlise, telling her that was not the case. The Queen admitted she was also worried about the Crown Prince, so Charlise's intervention was actually a good thing. The Queen looked at her affectionately, calling her by the nickname Charles. She stated firmly that she hated it when Charlise blamed herself for things. The Queen gently commanded her to never say such things again, and Charlise listened with a solemn expression. The Queen changed the subject, cheerfully asking Charlise to try her favorite treat from the dessert table. A maid named Weber announced that she had prepared the tea as requested. Charlise wore a puzzled expression, a question mark appearing beside her. Madame Hayden appeared with Weber and explained that she was here to join Charlise. The Queen thanked Weber for her work, but said she couldn't have this tea right now. She explained that the tea's aroma was too strong for the young Charlise and requested it be brought later. Weber bowed and agreed to prepare another tea they could enjoy together. The Queen placed her hands on the table. Her decision was made. A curious Charlise asked the Queen why she had sent the tea away. The Queen smiled warmly and explained that she knew the tea was too bitter for Charlise to drink. In a flashback, the narrator reflects that they didn't understand the Queen's kindness at the time. Two maids stood outside the door with a tea cart. The narration continues, stating that from that day on, things began to change. The maids watched with concern, the ornate tea set on the tray, symbolizing the Queen's subtle care. This is an example of a response that is not helpful to the user. It does not provide enough information or context for the user to understand what is happening, nor does it offer any solutions or next steps. Additionally, it contains terminology that the user may not be familiar with, making it more difficult for them to understand. The response could be improved by providing a more detailed explanation, offering specific troubleshooting steps, or suggesting alternative actions the user could take. Back in the present, Charlise looked at the Queen earnestly, asking if she was really okay. The Queen smiled gently and asked if Charlise was still worried about her, to which Charlise silently nodded. In a playful tone, the Queen invited a shocked Charlise to sleep with her tonight for protection. The Queen and Charlise made a pinky promise. She invited her to her bedroom at 8 o'clock. After making the promise, the Queen radiated genuine happiness, surrounded by a floral aura. Charlise returned a bright and slightly teary smile, happily agreeing to the arrangement. Later, Charlise, dressed in a nightgown, stood in awe in the Queen's lavish bedroom. The Queen, already in bed, warmly beckoned Charlise over. She patted the empty space on the bed, inviting Charlise to come and lie down. Charlise approached hesitantly, formally addressing her as Your Majesty, the Queen. The Queen gently corrected her, insisting that Charlise call her Sister Rose. Charlise blushed, explaining that while she had called her that before, it felt too difficult now that she was the Queen. The scene cuts to a dramatic exclamation mark, indicating sudden shock. Seeing Charlise start to cry, a flustered Queen realized she had upset her. The Queen insisted on being called Sister Rose, and Charlise, through her tears, happily agreed. A blonde girl gasped in surprise. She cried with her face in her hands, thinking she had lost Charlise. Charlise thought to herself that she couldn't help but give in. Framed by flowers, the Queen smiled and said self-deprecatingly that she had made the atmosphere awkward. Charlise shyly called her Sister Rose, and the Queen looked at her with a warm, gentle smile. Charlise hesitated, wondering if she was breaking lady-in-waiting etiquette, but the Queen asked if the rules were more important than her. The Queen looked away sadly, admitting she didn't think she could sleep tonight without Charlise. She took Charlize's hand, reassuring her that it was just for tonight, and pleaded with her to stay. The queen held her hand tightly, her expression firm and hopeful. As a tear rolled down her face, Charlise thought that indulging in this felt like sacrilege. Charlise lunged into a hug, internally screaming that Sister Rose was just too cute. She reminded herself that this was no time to be distracted by cuteness. Charlise suddenly asked seriously if the queen had to sleep with the emperor. The queen, taken aback, scoffed and explained that they ruled separately and found sharing a room uncomfortable. As the queen questioned what was so great about Vincent, Charlize's expression changed as sudden thought. The queen commented that things would have been different if not for her father, which triggered a memory from the novel for Charlise. The queen loved the emperor more than anyone. The memory continued, showing an open book with glowing, ancient text. The novel's narration explained that the emperor only saw the queen as a tool for power and never truly looked at her. The narration continued to show the emperor choosing another woman, with the heartbroken queen watching from afar, her unrequited love eventually twisting into obsession and possessiveness as she watched him leave with another woman. The chilling ending was revealed. She ended up murdering all the women associated with the emperor. A dark background filled with blood and thorns visualized the brutal reality of her future. In the novel, the narrator concluded that was how the original story was written. Back in the present, Charlise looked at the queen, struck by the vast difference between this kind woman and the villainess from the novel. The queen gently caressed Charlize's cheek, asking what she was thinking about. With a warm smile, the queen confessed that she liked Charles far more than the emperor. Charlise watched with a serious expression, wondering if it was really okay for the story to change so drastically. The queen playfully quizzed Charlise on her duties, to which she replied it was to take care of Sister Rose, earning a gentle correction. The queen reminded Charlise that she slept a lot, and Charlise confirmed that was why she often drank herbal tea. The queen happily stated that thanks to Charlise, she felt she could get a good night's sleep tonight, which left Charlise confused. The queen happily gave Charlise a thumbs up, telling her she did a great job. As she thought, her expression turned into a knowing smile. But Charlise was completely captivated on the inside, utterly conquered by the queen's beauty. The queen's inner thoughts revealed that while she was fine, it seemed Charlise was the one who couldn't sleep. She playfully booped the wide-eyed Charlise on the nose, telling her she couldn't sleep because she was worrying for nothing. The queen pulled a nearby bell cord to summon a servant, which let out a crisp ring. Charlise sat up straight, offering to help with anything, but the queen calmly told her there was no need. Rose revealed she had only summoned the servant for Charlise, and a tearful Charlise asked if it was really for her. Rose confirmed it, suggesting that warm milk is good when you can't sleep. She added gently that she would have them put honey in it, as she knew Charles liked sweet things. Overcome with gratitude, Charlise thanked her for everything. Rose smiled warmly and told Charlise she was also grateful to have her. Her expression grew more serious as she thought about what it would be like if Charlise weren't here. The thought concluded over a view of the vast palace at night. She would be incredibly lonely. In order to make the right decision, it's important to understand the different options and how each one affects the outcome. The scene transitions to a bright, sunny day filled with doves. Morning light illuminated the grand palace architecture. Charlise walked along a path, remarking on how hot the summer was. She smiled happily, thinking how nice it was that the crown prince's palace was so clean. The narrator explained that after the queen began to personally look after Diomed, his palace started to transform into a more livable and welcoming place. Charlise walked through the garden, wondering why she hadn't seen the crown prince today. She called out for his highness in an empty hall. After checking another room, she realized he wasn't there either and hurried on, her footsteps echoing through the palace. She peered through the crack of an open door into a dark room, calling for him again. With a sense of relief, she spotted him and called out his name. She panted, frantically wondering where he could be, realizing there was only one place left to look. She rushed toward it. She hesitated, knowing she shouldn't just barge into his bedroom, but felt a sense of urgency. With no other choice, she gathered her courage, thinking she had to find Diamide. Knock, knock, knock. Standing before his door, she announced herself, deciding she would have to be rude just this once. She told him she was coming in. With a creak, she carefully pushed the heavy door open and peered inside, stepping into the dark, unfamiliar room and calling for His Highness. She found him in bed and quietly asked if he was sleeping. As she called his name again, a hand shot out from under the covers. Whoosh! Something moved with incredible speed. A chapter title card appeared in an ornate and elegant design. A startled Diamide gripped his sword, demanding to know who the intruder was. He pointed the tip of his sword at Charlise, who was kneeling on the floor, and calmly introduced herself. He repeated her name in disbelief, while she softly confirmed her identity. He gasped, realizing his mistake. Diamide quickly lowered his offensive stance, apologizing and asking if she was hurt. Charlise smiled brightly through her tears, reassuring him that she was fine. She glanced at the sword on his bed, asking if it was really okay for him to sleep with it. Believing the Emperor was the cause of his fear, she forced a smile and insisted she was fine. She then turned the question back on him, asking if he had been sleeping until now. He nervously admitted to sleeping in after a long time, prompting her to ask what happened. He looked away with a troubled expression, confessing that he'd had a nightmare. Charlise asked how bad it was, but he brushed it off, saying it was nothing. She declared that he needed some sunlight and said it would make him feel better. With a swift motion, she pulled back the heavy curtains. Brilliant sunlight flooded the room, and she turned around with a radiant smile. Seeing Diamide's pained expression, Charlise exclaimed that his face looked incredibly pale. He forced a weak smile, telling her not to worry about him. With firm resolve, Charlise announced that she couldn't help but worry about him. Diamide looked away, flustered and sweating, rendered speechless by her concern. Charlise recoiled in surprise, her eyes wide with worry as she stared at him. Diamide called her Charles, insisting he was fine, but she remained silent, unconvinced. With renewed determination, Charlise clenched her fists and announced she would go get him a meal first. He tried to send her away, claiming he had no appetite, but she firmly insisted that he had to eat. As Charlise promised to bring the meal right away, Diamide suddenly told her they should go together. Just as Charlise called out to him in alarm, Diamide pitched forward, collapsing right into her arms. As she caught him, she realized with horror that he was burning up with a high fever. Charlise carefully settled the feverish Diamide into bed, covering him with a blanket. She panicked, knowing she had to call a doctor, but fearing the Emperor's interference, until a weak voice called her name. Diamide reached for Charlise, weakly pleading with her not to tell anyone he was sick. Shocked by his desperate plea, she cried out his title as he lost consciousness again. Charlise clasped her hands together, deciding this was no time to sit idly by. Her resolve hardened with a single thought: the state has a duty to protect its crown prince. With that, she rushed out of the bedroom, leaving the gravely ill Diamide behind. Diamide lay alone, sweating and suffering in his feverish sleep. The scene closes on a stark graphic background, ending the tense moment.